What's going on here? What's this all about?
Wow, we could just jump in deep with that one.
Please do.
I was like, man, wouldn't that be cool to go to the Discord house and get a picture on those steps?
Yeah,
Every punk rocker wants to get a picture on those steps.
absolutely.
Just kind of writing and creating from within, from who you are. What is the attitude of the heart towards whatever we're doing?
Yes.
Can there be a way in which, no matter what we're doing, if we have the eyes to see it, the microcosm of the liturgy reminding us, what does it mean to offer up the paintbrush
Yep.
and the bass guitar and the changing the diapers, all of these things, like to offer those up to God as a continuation of our prayer. All of life needs to become prayer, and what we are accustomed to call prayer is only a tiny part of it.
Okay, we are live. And everyone, welcome to the Study of Stuff. With me today is Father Christopher Foley, the bass player from Luxury. Most of you guys already know who Father Christopher is from our chats. He's been in our chat groups a couple times, and he's a wonderful human being. We've had a lot of conversations privately, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you, Father. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be here.
Before we start, I wanted to kind of touch base on a few commonalities we have. One of the big common things we have is you've mentioned the Violent Femmes in a couple of your interviews, and I'm wearing my Violent Femmes shirt.
Oh, nice. I like it.
It's the first concert I took my daughter to, one of my favorite bands of all time. And hearing you mention them really got me excited. So what was it about the Femmes that really attracted you?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. That's actually probably one of the first bands that I was exposed to that was just non-mainstream. Around the same time, someone had played to me Dead Kennedys, Black Flag. They let me borrow that first Violent Femmes album, and I don't know, just as a 8th, 9th grader, it felt dangerous, but it felt just raw.
Yeah.
I loved the musicianship. I loved just his lyrics, the way he performed them. And I just think they're brilliant songwriters. I mean, it's just, I don't know, they just captured so much of like a little angsty teenager.
One of the reasons why I brought it up first and foremost is not only because they're one of my favorite bands. Actually, that's one of my favorite bass players. Is Brian Ricci is one of the greatest. I have a love and respect for bass players and drummers. I'm not a bass player and I'm not a drummer, but that's when I songwrite, that's the first thing I think of is the bass and the drums. It kind of keeps everything together. So for me, Brian Ricci is one of the greatest bass players of all time, and he's just incredible. And you remind me of him actually quite a bit.
Oh wow, gosh. No, that song "Never Tell" on Hollow Ground. That bass line and that song, it sends chills up my spine.
Yes, that's a great album.
So.
Okay, before we get going, I also wanted to bring up this. What's going on here? What's this all about?
Wow, we could just jump in deep with that one.
Please do.
Well, maybe we'll,
Do you want to work towards that? Did I bring it up too quickly?
Work towards it a little bit because I need to be some background. But that's great that you just threw that up there to begin with.
Yeah.
So this happened like less than a year ago.
Okay.
So just to back up, so I grew up in the Atlanta area, was raised in a, kind of a strong Protestant, home, went to a private Christian school, kind of sheltered a little bit. And then once I discovered, kind of the punk rock scene and in the late 80s, it rocked my world. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that maybe as kind of a separate category. But in the midst of being exposed to the underground, like the hardcore scene, I was so drawn to, as a Christian, because there weren't Christian people playing this kind of music. I discovered bands like 7 Seconds, Minor Threat, Youth of Today, these bands who were kind of part of the straight edge scene. And for me as a Christian, that did not conflict at all. If anything, it just was like, man, these people like believe in something, like it's bold, it's energetic, it's positive, it's activism, wanting to change, and like for all the right reasons,
Yes.
wanting to make the world a better place. And so obviously part of that is Minor Threat and the whole DC hardcore scene. So that whole scene has just always been a huge influence for me, not only as a musician and in the punk scene, but also I think as a Christian, like here's people that actually believe something and, have moral clarity on issues. And, I was not seeing that in necessarily the Christian world I was a part of so much. So Ian MacKaye is just somebody who is always represented to me. Here is a principled man who really believes in something and just could care less what anybody else thinks about it. So I would say besides, the church fathers and my faith in Christ and all of that, I would say he is probably one of the biggest influences on me growing up, and I would say continues to be. So last year, I happened to be in DC because I'm a member of the Metropolitan Council for the Orthodox Church in America. So we had a meeting up there. I had a few hours in my day after my flight got in. And, on this flight, I was like, man, wouldn't that be cool to go to the Discord house and get a picture on those steps?
Yeah.
Every punk rocker wants to get a picture on those steps.
Absolutely.
And I had heard, that Ian was pretty approachable. And if he happened to be home, like, I think he comes out, So, I mean, it's almost embarrassing to say it, but not really. I mean, I was in the car and an Uber on the way over there, and I prayed. I said, Lord, allow me to meet Ian. And I pray that we can just sit down and have like a serious conversation and just connect. And so I walked up and I found the house, and the screen door was the front door was open. The screen door was closed. So I could tell somebody was there. So I knocked on the door and I hear this, oh, hold on a second. And then Ian MacKaye comes, the guy comes to the door. And it's like, okay. So I had kind of an elevator speech in my head of how I would introduce myself. Because we have a lot of mutual friends over the years, bands that I knew in Atlanta and stuff were on like Ian's sister's label, Sandwich Records. And so we had a few people in common, so I said, okay, well, my name is Father Chris. I'm an Orthodox priest, been a fan of, Fugazi for years and years. I've met Justin Marler. I know that you have a connection with him. I don't know. I just kind of did this little 2-minute speech, and he was like, oh gosh, well, it's not every day an Orthodox priest knocks on your door. Come on in. So he invites me in.
Yeah.
He's like, so, Justin Marler, man, I got to be on Spruce Island for like a few weeks. And, I got to visit where St. Herman lived. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this like weird together of like all of my worlds. This is like, I didn't know what to do. So he was all excited. He went and got his computer and he opened it up and he showed me all of his pictures from Spruce Island. And he's like, yeah, I got to help, build the chapel there. And, when Justin Marler was a monk there, and, this lady we knew from the scene in DC, she's actually a nun up there, and we got to see her. And man, we just had this great conversation. And I knew that his father had died recently. His dad taught at an Episcopal seminary in DC. Okay. So he grew up Episcopalian. And so we actually prayed for him for the 40 days at our church when I heard that he passed. I just put him on our prayer list. And, so I told him that, and he's like, oh, well, thank you. And he really opened up and shared with me the struggle of, his dad's health and how he and his brother and sister were taking care of him. And he told me stories about being a young altar boy
Okay.
at an Episcopal church, and he remembers the day that Martin Luther King was killed, and there were all these riots, and so his priest and the community like made a procession down to where the riots were after the service that Sunday morning, and so he just really opened up, and we just had this great connection. And then he asked me the question that I've been dying to have a conversation with him about all these years. So tell me, why, you being raised as this little Protestant kid discovering punk rock, like, how are you an Orthodox priest now? I mean, most of like the straight edge kids like in New York became Hare Krishna, and your story and Justin Marlar's and out in San Francisco, all of them became Orthodox. Like, what is that? Tell me. I'm not a very religious person, but I want to know. So we got to talk, and I told him kind of the story of my conversion, and he just thought it was great. I mean, it was just a great conversation. And then he said, "Oh, let me show you around. Have you ever like gotten a tour of the Discord house?" No. He took me to the office, where all those pictures are. He took me down to the basement.
Oh yeah.
Where, used to practice in Fugazi, and he's like, "Oh, but I want to show you something. You've got the priest pass." And so he walked over to the other side of the basement, and there was this like state of the art door. Opens the door, and he leads me in, and there's this really nice archive of Discord archives there, and so it was just pretty amazing. I spent about probably 2 hours there, and he invited me back. He said, "If you're ever back in town, I'd love to play for you some. We recorded every single one of our practices."
Really?
Yeah, and so he's like, "I could show you some early Fugazi songs before they got fleshed out." And so seeing like the masters of all of the the early Discord, like Rites of Spring, like, that was my favorite band. So like I saw the masters of Rites of Spring, Shudder to Think, like all of I mean, so it was just awesome. And so after I left, I had to go. I went down the street waiting for my Uber, and I just sat on this bench. I got to meet, I don't want to call him an idol because, that's such a weird thing to say, but, just somebody that I really respect. And we were able to just sit down and have just a serious conversation talking about real things that matter to each of us. It was such a gift.
That's such a beautiful story, and that's why I kind of wanted to throw a curveball at you to kind of throw you off a little bit to get that childlike reaction out of you, which I think we got.
My 15-year-old self now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a big deal. I remember, for me, coming back to the faith, seeing and hearing these stories of people like Ian Mackay and Justin Marlar and Luxury and all of you guys. It had an impact on me. It did, like, just as an adult, kind of realizing, like, there's something about my own faith I didn't value, I didn't appreciate, and all these other people found something in it, found this truth in all of this sort of dark world that we kind of live in, and it's a big deal to me. That's why I wanted to kind of start off with that. I wanted to get your reaction out of it, which I think that's exactly the reaction I got. That's a great story.
Yeah, it's great.
And it encompasses quite a bit. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, and I'm sure we'll come back to it because the DC punk scene is a big deal in your story. It's often brought up in every interview you've had. I think almost every interview I've listened to, including the documentary, which is wonderful. I'm sure we'll get to that as well. DC punk scene comes up. But before we get to the DC punk scene, tell me about yourself growing up, finding punk, finding music, finding whatever that community was to you, because your upbringing was very different than mine, and I'm really interested in hearing it.
Well, like I said, I mean, I grew up in a very strong, evangelical home, just from an early age. I was taught to love the church, love Christ, love the scriptures. My faith meant a lot to me growing up. And then all through high school, I was very involved in like going on mission trips. And I was even contemplating like becoming a missionary. But I also struggled with the whole kind of youth movement within evangelicalism that I think probably started in maybe in the 70s, but it's like, oh, let's meet the kids where they're at, and have these rock bands that come in and get everybody all hyped up for Jesus, and then we'll bring in a speaker that'll come in and give a convicting talk, and everybody will cry and rededicate their life to Christ. And like I just got to the point where it just felt so manipulative, and I don't want to be manipulated
Yep.
anymore. Like I love God, but like just all of the emotional stuff, I'd look around me and everybody's having these like ecstatic experiences, and I'm just like, no, I'm not going to do it. I love God. I don't have to like prove it through walking down some aisle again and rededicating my life, and a lot, some of the Christians around me too. Like it was just it felt like it was this big image management system, and that people weren't just being real with one another, and then we're teaching other people how to also perpetuate the image management of all of that. So that's what was going on around the time that I got introduced to, Violent Femmes, Dead Kennedys. I mean, those are kind of the first bands I heard, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what this is. It feels dangerous, but I'm drawn to it. And so I just started doing the deep dive. I had a group of friends, and we all, were skating together and, started going to shows. And I can remember distinctly the first punk show I went to, 1986, 7 Seconds in Verbal Assault.
Oh, wow.
And it just rocked my world. The energy, everybody's there. It was like this community, like everybody was there, part of the same thing, it was very countercultural. Obviously it was like, no, we're not going to be what society wants us to be. We're going to do our own thing. But then discovering that there was this, whole straight edge scene, and that within the punk scene, there were, all these different subgroups of, skins and mods and punks and straight edge and crust punks and, all of this stuff. But, I think discovering the straight edge movement was like, gosh, this is stuff that is consistent with my faith in terms of, just an activism, moral clarity against racism, against sexism, against, drugs and, one night stands. And then people lived it out and cared about it.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
So for me, there wasn't really anything that conflicted with my Christian faith. I mean, certainly in the scene, there was all kinds of drugs everywhere, and, fights, and, the shows are very violent. And, but in Atlanta, we had a great local scene where we had a lot of bands. We would open our own venues. We started our own record labels. I remember helping to start a record label called Lunchbox Records, and we would put out these compilations with a lot of great local bands that needed to get heard. We would put on benefits to raise money for Habitat for Humanity and different homeless organizations. We would volunteer our time delivering food to elderly people, and it was just a great scene. And I'm still dear friends with many of the folks that I met back then. So it was a community, and I was longing for authenticity and community. And I think those were the things that really drew me. And I think that's why the DC scene was very much that way. So I would go up to DC and visit people up there. There's this great, it's a very liberal political activist group called Positive Force DC, but you could stay at their house if you were traveling through.
Okay.
So my future wife, her family's from New Hampshire. So every time we would drive up from Georgia, we'd stay at the Positive Force house. And so we'd get to, meet some of the people. And I was just really impressed, I think, just with their whole scene, even though like politically and things, they're also on very different pages.
Of course, of course.
But I think that's, for me, that's why it wasn't in conflict.
Right.
So I never like delved into the whole like, crazy party scene or, drugs. Like none of that appealed to me at all. It was more just the music, the do-it-yourself ethic.
Exactly. That's what drew me to the DIY community thing. Is definitely a big part of it. At what point did you find orthodoxy? It was because I think it was early on in your career, right?
Yeah. It was after I went off to college. So I went off to a small Protestant liberal arts school in North Georgia. That's also where I met all the luxury guys. So that's a whole nother part of that story. But there was a group of about 45 of us or so that went to this little local church, and we were just longing for something more. Our assistant pastor started reading the early church fathers, started learning about the kind of liturgical forms of Christianity, learning about the liturgical year. We eventually found out about this group called the Evangelical Orthodox Church.
Yes, they keep coming up lately. Sorry.
Yeah,
Keep going.
so that was our time. We eventually became an Evangelical Orthodox Church for a few years.
Okay.
That was right around the same time that luxury was starting to get some traction, and we had signed, our with Tooth and Nail Records. So that was kind of going on at the same time. So me and the singer from Luxury, he was part of that group, Father David. Make a long story short, after about, 5, 6, 7 years, we realized, we're on a journey, and it's really an oxymoron to be kind of an independent. Basically, the Evangelical Orthodox was a Protestant denomination borrowing very, very heavily from Orthodox worship and ecclesiology and practice, but was still independent from the Orthodox Church. So a lot of our individual communities came into canonical Orthodoxy at some point. So our community came in to the Orthodox Church in America kind of in I guess it was late or early 2000s.
Oh yeah, because thank you for that clarity. Because I wasn't exactly sure what to make of them, because they've only been coming up in a couple interviews I've done recently, and I was going to look into them. So thank you for that explanation. The reason why I brought up orthodoxy before bringing up luxury, because you seem to be the catalyst, if I can say it that way, for a lot of things with luxury. Not necessarily from like, I know Lee Bozeman, Father Dave. He does the songwriting, all that stuff. But you seem, in most of the stories I'm hearing, because luxury is new to me. I didn't know of any of the Christian bands or any of that stuff. That was never on my radar. In fact, I worked for Sony BMG, and I was like on an indie record label, and we had an indie record distribution center, and we distroed a lot of the Christian bands. And to me, I never made much of them. Obviously I was a secular Greek kid. To me, Protestant music was like the lot, so I had no idea who luxury was or any of that stuff. So it's kind of cool for me to kind of go back into your guys' history and your catalog and like go through all of that. So again, to get back to the point, the reason why I brought up orthodoxy first is because you do seem like the catalyst for a lot of things throughout the band's history. You do seem like kind of the person that pushes everyone over the edge. And I think you were the first Orthodox within the band. Did you bring orthodoxy to the band? So now if you can talk about finding the band, meeting the band, and introducing orthodoxy into the whole circle of the story.
Okay. Yeah. Well, going to Tacoma Falls College, is a very conservative school. So anybody that was remotely interested in, non-mainstream music, I mean, you just find each other across the cafeteria. Like, oh, I see some Doc Martens over there. Oh, a Smith shirt. Okay, I need to find that guy.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially what happened is, we all found each other. And, I think because I had been in bands all through high school. So, I mean, that was one of my goals. I was there to study missiology, but I really wanted to start a band. So I met, Father David. He had never sung in a band or anything before. He didn't play even an instrument, but his brother, Jamie, Father James, he played guitar. We found a drummer, a different drummer at first, but then eventually found Glenn. So it was the four of us at first, and we just started playing. But our musical styles were pretty different.
Yeah.
Me obviously coming from kind of that Discord scene, Father David, huge Smiths fan, Morrissey, Depeche Mode, Father James, kind of like some of that same stuff, but he also liked, U2 and the drummer. I mean, he was a huge Kiss fan, Led Zeppelin, all of that, the Jam. So I think we came together and just kind of crafted this unique thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we never were interested in being like a Christian band, so to speak. I mean, we were obviously all Christians, but we just played the venues. We played, over in Athens and Atlanta, and we eventually started our own little venue in the town and just did it ourselves and just brought bands there. And then we opened for a lot of them. But in the mid 90s, it was a real unique time in I would say kind of what eventually became known as kind of this Christian alternative underground scene, because there was a lot of people like us who were from a Christian background, had no interest in the Christian music scene, but there was a lot of us who were around. Mm-hmm. So a few record labels then started that were interested in those type of bands. So like Tooth and Nail is one of the labels that came out. And I think their philosophy was, well, let's try to get our bands kind of in the mainstream market and on college radio and support them. But, there's still Christian bookstores and things that, we could also distribute there. So that was kind of the problem. We were in kind of the first generation of those bands. So after we got signed to Tooth and Nail, mostly you could only get our albums in Christian bookstores, even though we thought we were signing something that was going to get us more, charting on CMJ and, getting on some good tours with some, bands that we actually listened to.
Yeah.
So kind of like the one Christian thing we would do every year is play this festival in Illinois called Cornerstone Music Festival.
Yeah.
So this was run by a group of Jesus freak hippies called Jesus People USA. And
really? Okay.
Yeah, they were like a commune basically in inner city Chicago.
Okay.
And they ran this homeless ministry, and they had this farm out in southern Illinois. And every summer they'd, have all these bands play. People would camp out. It was like a Christian Woodstock or something.
Okay.
But it was actually a cool thing because all, community. It allowed a lot of us to meet other people who were just, we could understand each other.
Right.
Hey, we're Christians. We don't fit in this like Christian subculture, the evangelical world, but we also, people maybe think we're too Christian. We don't fit in at the the venues either. I mean, so it was just kind of a nice way to build community. And that's where the guy from Tooth and Nail, Brandon Ebel, saw us play. We played an impromptu stage one summer, and he offered us a record deal on the spot. And, that was kind of the beginning of our, I don't know, small but relative success in that world. So we put out 2 albums on Tooth and Nail and did some touring. But that paralleled about the time that we were becoming Orthodox, or see, Father David was in that group that I was in,
right.
That we started just learning more about Orthodoxy. I think my wife, well, she wasn't my wife at the time, Carrie, we were dating, we were going to this church where we were starting to learn about Orthodoxy at these Bible studies.
Okay.
And then these priests started coming down from Indianapolis who were part of the Evangelical Orthodox Church. And that's when I started telling all the guys in the band about it. But Father David was the only one, and his wife, Amy, seemed interested. So they started coming to those meetings. So I would say for kind of those early days, it was really just Lee and I, Father David.
Yeah, because Father James had like he kind of distanced himself from it a little bit.
Oh yeah, he thought he was concerned about us. He thought we were joining the cult.
Of course, yeah.
Like he would talk smack about us, behind our back, like, oh man, I'm concerned about, Chris and me, I don't know. It's kind of like the concerned older brother.
Yeah, for sure.
Be a Christian and, watch out for his brothers who are, falling into error.
I totally get it. And also because as a evangelical youth, kind of the whole icons and all this stuff, it was like big no-nos too. So I could see it being a culture shock for him right. as well as you guys.
Yeah, but I think the more I discovered orthodoxy, the more I started reading the early church fathers, the more I started understanding this orthodoxy. I mean, to me, it resonated on such a deep level. The only way I could describe it is the more I would learn, it was like, man, this is what I've always believed, but I never had the words for it. My beef with Protestantism, it wasn't so much, my problem wasn't with God. It was just, there was such a dissonance kind of in my soul with what was around me, but I didn't have any other alternative. I started becoming very cynical, and I just didn't like the person I was becoming because I wound up just kind of making fun of like all of the Christianity around me. And I mean, cynicism, if you get stuck in that too long, it starts to destroy your faith. And so that was around the time that as I was learning more about orthodoxy, experiencing the worship of the church, I think early on reading For the Life of the World by Father Alexander Schmemann.
Oh, yes. Yep.
To me, reading that book just opened a lot of doors for me. It just, in my mind, kind of a way to frame even how, as a band, we were artists, we were Christians, but we didn't, just this whole dichotomy of like secular versus sacred, just, it didn't seem right, but I didn't have any words to say why this is not correct. And so this first chapter of Father Alexander's book, he just talks about kind of what is the mission of the church, the mission of Christianity in the world. And basically, he says, really, we miss the boat when we make it all about like a spirituality that has nothing to do with this world here.
Yes.
And then on the flip side, if we make it all activism, then like we lose our spiritual life. So he says, really, the vocation of man is to be what he says, a priest of creation. What does a priest do? A priest is one who takes the material of this world and offers it up to God with Eucharist. Thanksgiving, praise and thanksgiving. Lord, thank you for all of this. Send down your Holy Spirit upon us and upon these gifts here offered, and make this bread and the precious body of thy Christ, etc. So it's really liturgy as microcosm of, okay, this is what we do with our art, right? I mean, this is what we're endeavoring to do. We're trying to take these talents and things that God has given to us, and just we want to offer it up as something like, thank you, Lord, for giving us this talent. We want to do it well, and we want to craft something that's beautiful and hopefully has meaning, and ask you to bless it and return it to us as something life-giving. So then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, for a Christian artist, or I mean, any kind of, vocation that you're in, to be this priest of creation that's offering up something, and it gets returned to us as something life-giving. I'm like, okay, that's what I believe.
I love that, because you I've even heard you say it in a couple interviews where you describe it's not wheat and grapes, it's bread and wine, because if I'm sorry,
man's hands had to be involved.
Exactly. Right. Can you go into that a little bit, because it really caught my attention as someone that's struggling with trying to fit my art, because I'm trying to get back into songwriting, this and that, and I've had a little bit of a. It's been a weird struggle. I don't mean in a negative way, but hearing you speaking about that, it actually helped me a lot, because it kind of gave me the encouragement to kind of keep going forward and take this bizarre talent that I may or may not have and find a way to kind of present it in a way similar to the Eucharist, which in Greek means Eucharisto. It's like to give thanks.
Right.
And the way you put that, you mentioned it in the documentary, and you mentioned it in a couple of your interviews and a couple of the conversations we had, and prayer as work. That really made a big difference for me. So if you can kind of go into that a little bit. I know it's a little bit early in the conversation to get there, but we're there already. Let's go.
Yeah, we're there already. So, and it's part of my journey into the church too.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think we have this tendency, just like with music, the dualism, the secular versus sacred, that, we just luxury kind of pushed up against so much. To me, orthodoxy answers that dualism, that we reject the dualism.
Yep.
It's all sacred, but we have to bring that kind of universal character of the priesthood to it. So then it's not about, are we writing a Christian song, whatever that even means? Like, what makes a song Christian or not Christian? I mean, I think it's just bringing the totality of our life, of our, just kind of writing and creating from within, from who you are.
Right.
So there's this book. I mean, when I was in college, I wound up studying art as well, and an art history minor. And so I was really curious about what different Christian writers were saying about this. So there's a book called Art Needs No Justification by Rookmacher, I think is his last name. And his whole book is basically just saying that, like, we don't have to feel as Christians that we have to like somehow justify our art or make our art something that, well, the only way that we can justify it is if we're using it as kind of a propaganda tool in order to convince people about our faith. Hopefully, like a mature artist, isn't treating their art as kind of a propaganda tool, but just something that it flows from within who they are.
Yes.
And so as I eventually went off to seminary and kind of experienced, some classes on just prayer and how we think about prayer. And, I spent about 8 years between college and seminary while we were trying to make it with the band, working like piddly jobs. And I wound up becoming a house painter and was just really struggling through like, oh my gosh, am I going to like be painting houses the rest of my life? And oh my gosh, what, trying to find like meaning in the routine drudgery of life. And I had a priest at the time who just really encouraged me to, kind of think beyond those categories of, is vocation something kind of deeper than just what we happen to be doing? Kind of like, what is the attitude of the heart towards whatever we're doing?
Yes.
So that's when I started kind of reading from some of the church fathers. I had this great book that was given to me by Paul of Dokimov called Ages of the Spiritual Life. And I have this great quote here. I had to get it because I knew it's just worth repeating. He says, "It is not enough to say prayers. One must be prayer incarnate. It is not enough to have moments of praise. All of life, every act, every gesture, even the smile of the human face must become a hymn of adoration and offering a prayer. One should offer not what one has, but what one is." And
awesome.
man,
awesome.
I read that. It's just like, that just resonates because
Yeah.
whether it's art, whether it's struggling, with the painting houses for the rest of your life, it's like, okay, can there be a way in which no matter what we're doing, if we have the eyes to see it and, the microcosm of the liturgy reminding us, what does it mean to offer up the paintbrush and the bass guitar and the changing the diapers, all of these things, like to offer those up to God as a continuation of our prayer. Where I think it's Origen, actually, I have to be careful quoting Origen. This particular quote
just a bit.
is great. Basically, he says that, all of life needs to become prayer. And what we are accustomed to call prayer is only a tiny part of it. So that there's the
So
sense
true.
that there's one of these different registers on which we talk about prayer,
Yep. Yep.
standing in front of our icons,
Yep.
doing the Jesus prayer,
Mm-hmm.
standing in church at the liturgy. Those are forms of prayer. But he says there's really kind of these other forms of prayer. And St. John Cashin says that, if we are not outside of prayer the way that we are when we are praying in front of our icons,
Mm-hmm.
then when we're praying at our icons, we're really not praying at all.
That's awesome.
And so there's just this idea of our
That's
life
awesome.
being, one kind of continual, prayer. And maybe we have jobs that we can say the Jesus prayer while we're working.
Yes.
There was a time where I was working in a printing shop, and I was running a printing press where you really have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise your hands would get like pulled into the, the cylinders and crush your hand. And so, to be praying while doing that, I guess I would argue one isn't totally praying and one isn't totally being attentive to their work.
Yeah.
I read this book about this, a monastery where the novice kept, I don't know, like they left the kennel open and the dogs got out, or they backed their car up into the corner of one of the, like the refectory or something. And, the abbot was like, well, what's going on? Why are you, why are these things happening? And they're like, oh, well, I'm trying to pray the Jesus prayer while I'm praying, while I'm working.
Yep. Yep.
And the abbot was like, well, you're failing in both of those. You're not praying right, and nor are you working correctly. And it was the challenge to the novice, like, well, consider doing your work with attention
Yes.
and care,
Yes.
and doing it as unto the Lord. That becomes your an
Mm,
extension of your prayer, the amen of your prayer.
I see.
So I don't know. That was really helpful for me as kind of both struggling within the band and what does it mean to be, an artist who believed in Christ, believed, strong in my faith, but didn't really feel drawn to be, I don't know, kind of some evangelist or something,
Right.
but also struggling through, am I going to be a house painter the rest of my life? So it was kind of when I went through that, I realized, okay, well, I'm going to try to learn to be the best house painter I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought books on it. I was the head of a crew. So like, how could I be a better supervisor? What are some techniques we can do? I mean, it was like, I just jumped deep into the deep end of like house painting. And then I got to the point where I could say, you know what? If I'm a house painter the rest of my life, I'm totally okay with that.
Okay.
And it was only at that moment that then the door opened for me to eventually go to seminary.
Okay.
If I would have gone to seminary before that, I think I would have just been fleeing, looking for greener grass somewhere. If only, when I was at seminary, then my life will, really, matter.
Oh, that's an important moment. I like that. So you're surrendering to the job of being a house painter and possibly forever a house painter. Open the door for you to be prepared and ready to go to seminary. And what you're saying, if I can kind of reiterate it a bit, is basically you're saying that if you had gone to seminary before that, it would kind of be almost like an escape, I guess you would say. Is that what is that how you would have seen it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love that. So surrendering to it in the moment, it opened the door for you to do what your calling truly is. Right. Oh, I love that. Okay.
And so when I got to seminary, I wanted to write about that experience.
Okay.
And so it's kind of what my thesis, came out of that I wrote while in seminary, is kind of like this work as prayer, but this whole idea of the cell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's Abba Moses says, stay in your cell and it will teach you everything.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously for the monastic, that has a very specific and concrete, the temptation for the monk in the monastery is to desert the cell at the hour of temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And not to do one's prayer and go find out what's the latest gossip, at the monastery. Oh, Father so-and-so, you hear what he's cooking tonight or whatever. But I think for those of us in the world, that cell is just simply, being faithful to what God has on our plate for us today.
Right.
And embrace that.
Right.
And do it well and do it with attention. Mm-hmm. The spiritual life is not lived elsewhere other than what's right in front of us.
Yes.
And that's our cell.
Yes.
And if we stay in that cell, it will teach us everything. So in that instance with the house painting, that was my cell. I had to like stay in my cell of maybe I'll be a house painter the rest of my life.
Wow.
And it was only then that it taught me everything. Otherwise, it would have been escape.
Yep.
And, our Orthodox faith teaches us that, stability is a virtue.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to escape.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, that the spiritual life is lived in the routine stuff of life that is right in front of us, not, oh, if only I was at this monastery, if only I was at that seminary, if only I was at a parish where, I don't know, I like the priest better, or the choir didn't sing off key, or, it's lived out and just the real stuff of life.
I love that. That's so perfect. That's like, not to, forgive me if I'm speaking out of line, out of turn, but having interviewed so many people that have come from punk to orthodoxy, the common thread seems to be truth, and that reality of the darkness in the moment, the difficult time, the pain, the struggle, and finding something within that. That's not something that you're trying to avoid, but something that you're kind of dealing with the passions, understanding that struggle. Wow. Like, I love that the way you put that. That's so,
yeah. And that's punk rock.
Yeah. That's so punk rock.
Facing your stuff.
Yeah. I love that. That's well done.
From it. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing too, for me, like I keep thinking I want to write some article, like how punk rock prepared me for being a priest or something. And there's like so many aspects of that. But I think one of it is, with punk rock, what I loved about it was this activism, really like we're going to change the world out there. But then that only gets you so far, because that's a kind of a secular humanist type of attitude, like I am going to save the world and the problems are all out there. But what I love about orthodoxy, it turns it inward.
Yes.
It's the activism of the heart.
Yes.
Find peace with God here, and 1,000 around you will find their salvation. So it's this radical activism of the heart. If I want to change all of the stuff out there, if I'm so focused on what's out there, I'm going to miss the work that needs to be done here. And some of the Holy Fathers say, like, all the demons and all the angels are out there, but they're also within here.
Yes.
And we have to confront and face, all of our own darkness and stuff that's within us. And that's, to me, like what it was so life-giving about orthodoxy is like, okay, activism, I understand that, but now it's like the activism of the heart. I want to do that hard work on saving what's here.
Yes.
Rather than if I'm all focused out there, that's just a big distraction, and I can hide from my true self.
That's so true. I've been working with this formula. I mentioned it when I was we're talking about punk rock, Gelman Street, and orthodoxy with Buck Johnson. So I don't know why I blanked out there. And anyways, I was telling him about this formula that I'm kind of working on, which is DIY, do it yourself, plus anarchy equals nihilism, but DIY plus God equals monarchy, and our understanding of like the true monarch Christ, Christ. That's the monarchy I meant. Sorry, that's very important to mention. And in keeping our thoughts, our mind, and our actions towards what would the true monarch Christ, what would he want from us? How does he want us to approach this? Whether it's community, whether it's music, or whatever we're trying to build. And that's why when you sent me your thesis, I was really taken back by how much that was the emphasis on it, is like taking the action within the moment and dealing with things. And to me, I just kept seeing in it the reasons why I was attracted to punk rock, not to bring it back to that, but it really emphasizes that DIY spirit. Like, do it. You're the problem. Oftentimes you have to clear your noose so that you can clearly see before you start criticizing somebody else. I think you gave the example of the song, Gacy,
John Wayne Gacy.
Wayne Gacy. And I really like the way you put that, because the last line in there is to like look at your own, basement. What's in your basement? Like what's in your place?
Yeah. Look beneath the floorboards to the secrets I have hid, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Yes. It's so true. So going back to luxury. So now, how did you bring all that into your your career on stage, your career with the band, and dealing with all of that stuff? Because that must have been a lot. Because we're talking about before the accident or after the accident, where all this stuff's happening.
It was kind of about the same time, really. I mean,
Okay.
the accident happened actually on the feast day of St. John the Wonder Worker.
Oh, really?
So we were cognizant of that when it happened.
Okay.
So we were already kind of, coming into Orthodoxy enough to have a context.
Okay.
And I can also remember very clearly on the day of the accident. So I guess those of you who haven't seen the movie, when we were coming back from tour or from Cornerstone one year, our manager was driving the 16 passenger van. We were touring with another band, lost control and kind of overcompensated. And then the van wound up flipping 3 times. People were thrown out of the van. The van landed on Lee, our singer, Father David. 3 broken necks. I mean, it was really just a miracle that no one died. I was in a car following the van, and so I got to see it all happen. But I can remember very distinctly had been introduced to the Jesus prayer, I don't know, earlier that year. So I had a prayer rope in my pocket, and I can remember, you go into like automatic pilot when all of that happens, and you're this isn't really happening, but you're there. We're lifting the van off, and then finally, as the ambulances and everything are coming, and everybody's kind of being tended to, I'm like standing there, and at a time like that, there's nothing to pray. What do you pray? I mean, oh my gosh! So I was so thankful for the Jesus prayer at that moment, because that was like everything that would express the totality of, I am so overwhelmed. I have no idea what to pray, but Lord have mercy, show me your loving kindness, show them your loving kindness, come be present. Cause, so that was all going on kind of in the background of all of that. But, I think through the accident that really, it got us more serious, I think. I mean, we were always somewhat serious as a band. We never were some big party band or anything like that. We were, serious Christians. And, but, I think before the accident, we really were like, man, we want to make it, whatever that means.
Yep.
And so I think after the accident, and coming face to face with death and tragedy, I think we just got more reflective. And then I think our music then became a little more reflective from a deeper place. So I don't think we ever, as we became Orthodox, and then as Father James eventually became Orthodox, and then, we added a 5th member, Matt. I think we never, ever were like, well, how can we bring Orthodoxy into the band, or how can we use the band? I mean, it just, that would have just been so weird. I mean, we're Orthodox Christians, and like, we just live our life. And that's what was so refreshing. As an evangelical, it was almost like all these evangelical bands that we knew were wrestling with all of that.
Yep.
For us, it was like, gosh, there's nothing to wrestle with. Just be yourself, man.
Yep.
And so I think that's just what we always did, is we just always approached our music. We want to write songs. And, and I think with my background in kind of the DIY scene, I mean, I think I was behind the scenes trying to make it happen.
Yeah. I could see that.
And so I always enjoyed that side of it, of just really like connecting with people, after shows, just really hanging out and just talking with people till the last person leaves, just really wanting to treat, our fans like they were real people. And like, there's no division here between the band and the fans. We're all just here experiencing the same thing together. And how great it is that people want to come see you play. Like that floors us, that gets us excited about, what we're doing.
Your stage presence, all of you guys, because I watched some old footage and I watched some modern footage, and there was something different about that band at that time. Well, throughout the whole, even the couple of, because you guys did a couple of shows a couple of years back, and I saw that there's something there. You could see it. Like, I like the way you put it. Like, you're not trying to put like the whole orthodoxy thing front and center, but it's present by the way that you kind of, we're talking about earlier, work as prayer. It's kind of like, if as a musician, I've had those moments when you're on stage and something is moving you, you don't really know what's going on. It's kind of like you feel, it's like a trance of some sort. And if you're not present with it, it could take you in all these weird directions, sometimes in a good place, sometimes in a bad place, but there's something there moving you. And you can kind of see it with bands that aren't trying to, they don't have like an agenda. As you said earlier, they're trying to like give you some sort of propaganda message or just shove something down your throat. You see it with those bands that are just being themselves, kind of like prayer in the moment. And I could see that with all your live performances. All of you guys, they have this like this really bizarre move, not bizarre maybe, but it's like kind of like watching fish all move at the same time. Because as a person that was in a couple of bands and I was the lead singer, I'd always like to watch the rest of the band as I would, do my thing. And then I'd watch like footage of it and see like, how do we move? Do we move together like fish or like birds all turning at the same time? And you guys definitely have that. And you could feel it coming through the performance and the music itself. And I think you nailed it there with saying that you guys weren't trying to be overtly like, look at us, we're Orthodox. Look at us, we praise Jesus. You kind of just do your thing and present your gifts to the world, if I could put it that way.
And that was the weirdest part about this documentary that came out, is that we were never about wearing our faith on our sleeves, or we're just just being real. And then Matt did this documentary. So Matt's in the band, but he also is a filmmaker. So, but I remember asking my wife, Matyushka, I said, I'm kind of nervous about this documentary coming out because it's the first time since becoming a priest that we're kind of walking back into the band life.
Right.
And I don't really know how to navigate that.
Right.
And then she just said, it was just so great. She's just like, well, but it's your story.
Yeah.
Like, don't be ashamed of that.
Yeah.
Like, you express your priesthood in a unique way. We're part of, Christ is the only, great high priest, but, we all, different priests have different personalities and stories and backgrounds. And this is your particular story. So don't be ashamed of that. And I was like, that's wise. I'm married up for sure, but I think just it kind of has kept me kind of integrated because it's not this perfect little seamless thing because I never wanted to kind of use my priesthood to like sell the band or something, and that's where it just kind of felt weird. But here we were as a band that didn't really talk much about our faith, but now the whole subject of the film is about 3 of these band members became Orthodox priests. So NPR had us on, Weekend Edition. They wanted to talk about orthodoxy and, priesthood and faith. And it's just for a band that just didn't want to talk much about their faith overtly. Now that's all we're talking about. So it's been an interesting last, I guess 5 or 6 years. And
I think it came up organically because like as someone that wasn't into Christian music at all, wasn't even on my mind, any of this stuff. Now kind of walking into this world, that was one of my like, oh wow. Cause like people are sending me, as you tuned into that episode where Mr. Westford was playing me all this Protestant music. And to me, it's a culture shock. Like it's a huge culture shock. So what the point I'm trying to make is with Luxury, it seems like you guys did it organically where you didn't, jam it down people's throats. It kind of came up as a part of your story because it is your story. And then it became the focal point only because it matters. Because you didn't jam it down people's throats, because of that, I think that really shows. And the reason why I kind of brought back the whole accident thing at the time I did is because I had a feeling watching the documentary yesterday, because I rewatched it last night. And for everyone that's watching, I'm going to make sure to give you guys all the links. Go check it out. It's on Apple Video. It's on Prime. It's everywhere. You got to go watch it. It's really great. And it was heartbreaking. And it put me back. The documentary took me apart and put me back together again. I literally cried and I smiled and I laughed. And at the end, the very first thing I did is I prayed and I grabbed my guitar. Like those are the two things I did after I was done. I was like, I need to just sit down with this. And then I sat down and just thought about the whole story, how heartbreaking it was, and how it brought it all back together. And to go back to my point, the reason why I brought up the accident at the time I did is because I had a feeling. Someone had a prayer rope and the Jesus prayer with me. I swear to you, Father, I'm not just making that up. I'm like, there's no way. The story, the way it's told, the scene and the way it was broken down on the Lee's underneath the van, everything's crushed. Amy coming in to talk to him, you with the phone call to Amy. I was hurting for you. How do you make that phone call? Like all that stuff. And I'm like, there's no way. Christ was present at this whole thing. He was guiding this somehow. There's no way that this could be the outcome. There's no way. Like, there's no way. All of you guys turned out to be fine. All of you guys turned out to be better as people, if I could say it that way, than you were going into it. You guys were more grounded. The darkness was more prevalent, if I could put it that way too. Like, I could see it in you. I could see it in Lee. I could see it in Father James. I could definitely see it. Like, everybody kind of had this moment of darkness where they had to accept it. If I can kind of, I didn't expect to be saying all this right now, because so I'm kind of like taken back that I'm saying all this, but that's what the documentary was showing me, is that you guys had to deal with some seriously dark stories, dark situations, you not being able to look at certain vans anymore without like having that click back. I'm like, there's some darkness going on here with this band. And I'm like, there's no way Christ wasn't present there. Sorry for my little ramble. I just like it, the documentary took me, and then listening to the album, Parallel Love, like particularly that album, I'm like, okay, I think they were dealing with the situation all the way through, and I know Lee took like the the direction on that album, but I can really see all of you guys putting something on the table, particularly with that album. I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but I'm like, as a musician, as someone does the songwriting, I could see like the darkness. They're dealing with it here. This is the moment where they're like confronted with it, maybe because of the documentary, maybe because of your lives, maybe because of your families and all of that. I don't know. It took me aback. Sorry for the ramble, but it did something to me last night. I couldn't sleep last night.
No, I wept the first time I saw the finished documentary. I mean, yeah, because I mean, how many people, first of all, get to kind of see your own story, mm-hmm. like put in front of you, but it just, to see this whole arc mm-hmm. of these relationships, you're 18, 19, you have no idea what you're doing in life, but you've got the excitement, you've got the zeal, you've got the, and just, I think God's hand through all of that, through our journey into orthodoxy, through the band, through these friendships, relationships, we're still all best friends. We all just still love to make music together. And I don't know. It's like I thought that the music side of my life was kind of already kind of in the past. Mm-hmm. I mean, just kind of when I went off to seminary and all of that, just, moving on kind of thing. But, Lee kept writing songs and kept saying, hey, you guys want to get together, let's plan a time in 6 months and let's show up. And, especially when we did trophies, that accompanied kind of the documentary. I mean, that was like the first time really we had all gotten back together. I mean, since 3 of us had become priests, I mean, it was like we had really grown up since the album that it came out before that. And I don't know, you see it in the film where we're like blessing the studio. Yeah. Just like as a band, we were never one of these bands that like, well, let's pray together before practice, because it felt weird. Like, why do we need to pray before practice? I don't know. It felt, but it seemed like now as a priest, like, well, of course we have to mm-hmm. ask the Lord to bless the studio. I mean, mm-hmm. that's what we do. Mm-hmm. And then I think just to write now out of the experience of we've all lived a little bit more, we've seen a little bit more darkness. I think the 3 of us of priests, hearing people's confessions, going through the struggle of parish life and the struggle of all of that. I mean, it's just, I think we're writing from just a deeper place. Those bass lines are from a deeper place, but I think, I mean, Father David's songwriting, I mean, he's an amazing songwriter, both lyrically and musically. And Yeah, so I'm so excited that we still somehow get to do this, even though it's, you know, it took us 5 years for this last album to come out. We're all so busy, and then the chance to play 2 summers ago.
Yes. Yes.
That was the first time we had played shows in 19 years,
Yes.
and I think the three of us who are priests were a little bit nervous, like, okay, how do we do this? We don't, we still want to be very respectful of the priesthood and not cause scandal. And, before we were priests, I mean, I don't know. It's not like we try to be scandalous, but sometimes our live shows were a little edgy and provocative. And,
Just a bit.
So I think doing these two shows kind of showed us that there is a way to, maybe continue to do that every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it'll be a regular thing. I mean, and we got kind of the blessing from our archbishop, I think, kind of through all of it. And, he trusts his priests. He's like, well, you're priests, and just remember that.
Yeah, I think it's important what you guys are doing. To be honest with you, it has had and continues to have an impact on me, because I'm now. Normally what I used to do before coming back to Orthodoxy, I was very scholastic about things, and I tried to read as much as I can and research as much as I can. And since I've come back to the faith, I've kind of put that on the side, because I get caught up in that, and I'm trying to be more experience the moment. So with luxury, only now I'm going back to do my research, because I purposely avoided that with this part of my life. And revisiting your catalog and getting to know your music, as well as you as a bass player. I could tell you're an actual bass player that became a bass player because he loved the bass. It wasn't just a guitar player that didn't okay, you're not the good guitar player, you grab the bass. Because I have a love and respect for the bass and drums, as I've said many times. And when I write from that perspective. I could tell you're a bass player. You're legitimately, it's an art. It's not just a thing that you do. You're not just hitting root notes. I could even tell.
Well, rock. I mean, I love that punk music is so bass and drum oriented.
Yes.
I mean, and then I mean, Joe Lawley from Fugazi is a huge influence. For me.
Absolutely.
So
basically, we're getting towards the end of this amazing interview. If you have any final words or anything that you want to bring up in terms of summing up the whole point of just all of this, because you said so many things here, and I know when I'm going to sit down and edit this, I know I'm going to have a hard time finding how to clip together a reel, because it's just so great. So the reason why I brought it up this way is I'm also trying this new approach where I try to throw my guest off a little bit and put him in in a comfortable, uncomfortable position. So you're really good at it, because every time I've done it to you 3 or 4 times now, you've always gone into this deep rant of awesomeness. So if you could do that right now, and I'm setting you up in a way to kind of push you a little bit, put you in an uncomfortable position, go for it.
Gosh, well, if I would have to sum up, I guess the whole story of, coming from the punk scene, becoming Orthodox, now 18 years as an Orthodox priest. A book I have read recently gave me some words to think about it, and it's called This Beauty First Approach, from The Ethics of Beauty by Timothy Patitsis, I think is how you say his name. And just this whole idea of, we tend to kind of lead with our brains, and it's got to be truth first. Where he would treat soldiers coming back from the war that had PTSD, and he talked about how we handle those people. And he has this statement. He says, the opposite of war is not peace; it's liturgy. And he goes on, and kind of talks about that, and talks about beauty as a means of bringing people back into faith, bringing people from trauma back into faith through beauty, not through, rational, you need to talk about it, you need to understand what happened, but bringing them and inviting them into something that's beautiful. And I think that kind of just sums up what I love about Orthodoxy. It's orthopraxy. It's entering into a way of living so that we are living life from a place of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more than just like, well, so that means everybody should create art. I mean, certainly as an artist, that's part of it. But beauty as one of the energies of God, we speak of essence and energies distinction, and we don't know God in his essence, but we experience him through, all of these rays of the sun. They're emanating from him. Truth, grace, but so is beauty.
Yes, that's true.
So when we experience something that's beautiful and we have this transcendent experience, that is somehow God himself reaching out to us, and it's a sacramental thing, even if it's outside of the doors of the church. So Saint Maria of Paris speaks of kind of the churching of all of our life, meaning grace and beauty flows from that throne of God on that holy table, pours out of the doors of the church into this world. And now everything becomes a means of participation in God himself, if we have the eyes to see it. And so I think that's what we all do, or hopefully that's what we can all do, I think, as Orthodox Christians, is just approach everything that we do with this sacramental worldview, and that, God, who is beauty himself, is filling all things with himself. And so we want to somehow reflect that beauty and offer it up and try to kind of spread the fragrance and the beauty of Christ to this world, through that beauty first, approach. And that's, to me, that's punk rock. Let us commend ourselves, one another, and our entire life unto Christ our God.
Yeah.
That activism of the heart, offering that up to God with thanksgiving and joy and worship. So
that's beautiful. I love everything you just said there, and it really hit home for me too, because I'm at this place right now where I needed to hear that. So thank you so much, Father. Thank you very much for that. That was beautiful. Well, Father, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy day. I know a priest's life is ridiculously busy. Trying to book a priest is impossible. So I really appreciate you taking your time out to sit with me, have this conversation. Thank you so much, Father.
Yeah, no, it's a joy. It's a joy to be here. Great conversation. I loved it. Thank you.
God bless you.
Yeah, God bless.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the after party, the after show, the question and answers. Who knows where this conversation goes? Father Christopher Foley, welcome to the show yet again. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Great to be here live.
It is live. We were kind of live the whole time. I don't know if people realized it wasn't a regular premiere. Yeah. It was live. But Father Christopher, I don't know at which point you jumped in on while it was all going the video, but there was a lot of mic drops by you. You said a lot of amazing things. It's now my third time watching it through, and honestly, it was a great interview. I really appreciated the conversation we had. It was amazing, and I know everyone in the chats has a lot of questions or comments for you.
Yeah, it was great. It was interesting for me to rewatch it.
Awesome. So basically, the way we'll do this is totally freeform. We'll probably see if we could get some questions and answers from the audience. That we can maybe talk about some music and some of the subjects we touched upon. I think a lot of people that seen it were kind of surprised that we talked a lot more about God than we did about music. I think everyone kind of expected more of a music conversation, and I really liked the fact that we talked a lot about God, our faith, and the path that we got us there. So who knows where this conversation goes? So to start off, Manny, are there any questions in the audience that anyone wants to ask?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a few. Manny's going to read them because I suck at reading things out loud.
Denise asks, I didn't know there was Orthodox evangelist. What does this mean?
Oh, yeah. At one point in your story, you were talking about the Orthodox evangelical community.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's a group called the Evangelical Orthodox Church. And this was basically a group of Protestants who were borrowing very, very heavily from Orthodoxy. They were still Protestants, but they were doing the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom. They had clergy. They were, and so a group of them, there was probably about, I don't know, maybe 25 churches around the country.
Oh, wow.
Eventually, about 90% of them entered the Orthodox Church in 1987.
Okay.
And there was a handful of churches that kind of remained outside of the church. And eventually, that's kind of the group that we found out about. And then eventually, those remaining churches came in, to the church, like kind of in the early 2000s.
Okay. And do they still exist? The Protestant sect?
I think there still is maybe a handful of churches, but they have really turned more into emphasizing the evangelical side and not emphasizing as much the Orthodox side.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. It's always funny when you have these groups that splinter off, and then whenever you see them kind of come back into the fold, it's always, I should find a few that were from that early time and see what their story is like and how they kind of perceived the actual Eastern Orthodox Church when they encountered it. Actually, do you know of any people like that, or what were their experiences?
Yeah, I mean, most of that first wave came into the Antiochian Orthodox Church. Mostly like out in California, but a whole group of them actually went to Constantinople.
Oh, wow.
Because they knew that, there's the patriarch over there in Constantinople. So a group of them went, like all of the bishops from this evangelical Orthodox church, but the patriarch refused to see them. Probably like wise, he's like, who are these people?
Yeah.
So they came home and they're like, oh man, what are we going to do? And it was around that time that Metropolitan Philip of the Antiochian Archdiocese reached out to them and said, okay, well, let's have a conversation.
Okay, awesome.
And so within about 6 months, many of those churches came into Orthodoxy, and then some of the churches that stayed out just didn't feel like they were quite ready at the time. They were still kind of doing their semi-charismatic thing. So the I remember the first evangelical Orthodox liturgy I went to, they still had like acoustic guitars, and they had set like the Trisagion to this kind of, hippie, acoustic. Get
out of here.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny. Like they were kind of still in process, but
that's hilarious, because that's how I would picture it in my head too. I was like, it's like they bust out the guitars and they still maintain that.
Well, because most of them were like from the hippie Jesus movement,
right?
And
right.
so
right.
they loved like James Taylor and that kind of stuff. So of course the music that they were setting the liturgy to sounded like James Taylor, or like,
of course.
Anyway, so like the Gen X people like me were like, oh, this is awful. We want to chant, man. We don't want this hippie stuff.
Totally, which is so prevalent amongst Protestant groups that I've seen. I mean, not the hardcore ones, but like other ones I had experienced. It is kind of strange if you've never experienced that.
Right.
Manny, is there any other questions for Father Chris?
Yes, there are.
There's a few more questions. We'll take a couple questions. We'll talk some music.
Joseph Beard says, I was also raised in a Protestant home in a small town, GA. Not
Georgia.
Sure what that is.
Georgia. Yeah.
What do you think is the overlap of Southern culture and with Orthodoxy?
That's a good question.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, Joseph, I didn't know you were from Georgia. I'm curious to know what small town that was. Maybe you can respond. But I think, we joke around a little bit. Archbishop Dimitri, that started the Diocese of the South, at least in the Orthodox Church of America, he was, from the South. He had a Southern accent, and he used to joke around that we were Southern Rite Orthodox. And, so I think there is a sense that, I think Southern culture, by virtue of it being, I think very traditional. I'll walk into a coffee shop in the South. I'm in North Carolina, and people aren't scandalized by my cassock. They want to talk. Whereas in the Northeast, people might be offended. So I think Southern culture really is ripe, for orthodoxy. And so, I mean, I see it. We've got about, 90 inquirers right now in our parish. I've got 28 catechumens. And so, I mean, it's really, I think Southern culture very much is. Okay. I saw that you're from Douglasville.
Mm-hmm.
So you know about the Chariot and and all those bands from Douglasville.
Yeah, he mentioned that.
Same as the Chariot.
68, yeah.
Awesome.
There definitely is something about the South, that's for sure, because through the podcast, I've been introduced to a lot of Southerners that are, calling us to come to Texas and all this stuff. And then they mention Bishop Dimitri. You just mentioned him as well. Quite a bit. He comes up a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about him? Because
he was raised. Yeah, he was raised Southern Baptist, but he became Orthodox like in the 40s. So this is a time within Orthodoxy in America where, I mean, there was not an English parish to be found anywhere. You could probably count on one hand the number of books in English. So he and his sister converted to Orthodoxy in Dallas, Texas. And then he eventually, kind of became a bishop in the Orthodox Church of America and served up in the Northeast, but he always had a desire to come back to the South. So I think in 1979, the Diocese of the South was founded and he was sent back to the South. Yep. And I think at that point there was like maybe 6 parishes in the Orthodox Church in America, and they were part of the Diocese of like New England or New York.
Of course.
Yeah. So when he came back south, he was a missionary bishop. He really had a heart for missions, for growing orthodoxy. So he would talk to anybody.
Yep.
And so now, I mean, I think we have over 80 parishes now in the Diocese of the South, and he really is our missionary bishop. He died, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. I can't remember how long, but he was so beloved, so down to earth, just had a real heart for just an English language, indigenous Southern Orthodoxy. And, so he's really kind of our saint. And,
he also made his way to Mexico.
He helped establish the Exarch of Mexico. There were a number of dioceses that had been just pretty much abandoned by the Catholic Church. I think kind of in more rural parts of Mexico, like more like indigenous peoples.
That's right.
Not like Spanish Mexican, but like, so he had such a heart for them. So he embraced them. They decided to come into the church, and he was fluent in Spanish. He's done he did a lot of work in translating services and stuff into Spanish, and he spoke Japanese, Spanish, Greek, Russian. I mean, he spoke like 5 languages, but like so down to earth. You never would know it.
I hear a lot of great stories about him.
Yeah, they exhumed his body about, 3 or 4 years ago. I think when at the cathedral in Dallas, they set up a little chapel. So when they exhumed his body from the cemetery, his body was incorrupt.
Yes. I saw the documentary on that.
The pictures online, you can see.
Yeah.
So it's really just amazing. And like, he's been to our house, like I remember him coming when our church first started. And it's just, it's just that tangible side of orthodoxy, that incarnational side that, we met him, we talked with him, and he might be a saint.
Yeah, he's incredible because sorry, there's a lot of lag. So if it seems like I'm trying to interrupt you, I'm not. It's just there's a lot of lag on my end or your end. So just letting you know, I try not to so it's probably on my end. But yeah, because I keep hearing about him a lot. So I'm really happy he came up in today's conversation. And I like the excitement yet again on your face, just like in the interview in the beginning when I popped off a couple. I love seeing that on people's faces, like the excitement. Any more questions for Father Christopher? A few more questions, and we'll do so. Oh, before we do another question, how much time do you have? Because I want to make sure I respect your time.
Oh man, I got All the time in the world.
The SOS radio goes on for a long time sometimes. So just I'll make sure I respect your time. I'll clock in with you every once in a while.
I think I told you I kept like listening in on Sunday night, and I was doing something with the family, and I kept checking. I'm like, man, Nano's going. It's like 30. You still. I'm impressed. You all are dedicated.
Yeah, it's a lot of the people in the chat. It just turns into this thing, and then it's kind of I feel bad stopping it, so it just keeps going. So it's been fun. Sorry, Manny, what was the question again?
Girl Hex asks, coming from the punk scene on the path of orthodoxy, do we change our aesthetic, or does that just come with time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure totally what you mean by the aesthetic. That can encompass a lot of things, like the music, the look. I just think the longer one is Orthodox, the more that defines the totality of who you are. So I think early on, there shouldn't be emphasis on, oh gosh, you shouldn't be wearing that or, listening to that. I think the more one focuses on Christ and coming into kind of that full sacramental life of the church, I think there are just certain things that you just lose interest in. You're not so focused on the externals anymore. You're focused on, like I was saying in the interview, kind of the activism of the heart. Mm-hmm. That, just like punk rock, I mean, it's more of a, I don't know if I want to say the punk rock of the heart. That sounds so funny to say. But as Orthodox, we would say that, even the externals of Orthodoxy, like it's all about Christ, ultimately. Mm-hmm. So I think as one coming from the punk scene into Orthodoxy, I mean, you'll just be slowly changed and transformed by Christ in the life of the church. And there'll just be certain things that just aren't nearly as important to you anymore as they once were. But I think what you'll find is Orthodoxy, there's things that resonate with some of that, DIY ethic and that, desire to just live an authentic life. Mm-hmm. So Orthodoxy will like answer all of that. And then it's less about like punk rock as a label or whatever. It's more about just, I'm Orthodox and I'm from this background. I'm Orthodox and I like this style of music or whatever.
I think that's a good point, and you broke it down really well in the interview about even looking at it from the perspective of taking on the like the worship of the moment to make it prayer, like for work as prayer. That whole thing has been stuck with me since you mentioned it, since we talked about it, and I think that the aesthetic of punk kind of transforms itself through work as prayer. It's sort of your artistic work starts to take on that same sort of ethos, where all of a sudden it becomes of like, how can I better create this thing to represent myself towards offering to God, if I can put it that way. Would you agree with that? Because the reason why I'm asking you so much about this is because a lot of my audience has this problem with art and coming to Orthodoxy. So that's why I think it's a good, important part to talk, because I'm talking about 7 or 8 artists have reached out to me. I think you jumped in on the interview I was doing with Daniel. He was also talking about this a lot. So how would you view this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why for me, when I kind of understood that whole idea of work as prayer, an extension of our prayer, it was just so helpful, because then it made sense in all these different areas of our life, whether I'm in the studio trying to nail that bass part, whether I'm on stage performing, whether I'm a mother taking care of my newborn child at 3 a.m, whether I'm working in a factory, having to get there at 4 a.m, whether I'm, I don't know, serving as a priest in a parish who's trying to build a church and, trying to get everybody together on the same page, like herding cats, what does it mean to, kind of just this whole sense of life as prayer, of, how my whole disposition to whatever I'm doing is what matters
I love
ultimately.
that. I love that.
And seeing Christ in the midst of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think, and I think that helps a lot. Just thinking of it that way and trying to live it that way. I think that helps quite a bit. It makes every moment worthwhile.
Right.
So any more questions,
Right.
Manny? Oh, first of all, huge thanks to Brody, I think it was. Thanks, Brody, for the very first super chats we've gotten. So we just got monetized to on our channel. We just grew enough to be monetized, so we finally got this. So I'm filling you in, Father, just in case you're like, what's happening? What's happening? So Brody donated to us for this chat. So thank you, Brody. Much obliged, my brother. Any more questions, Manny? Oh, hold on a second. Sorry, say that again.
Yes, we got one from Brody. He says, I'm curious about some obscure or lesser known saints Father Foley is enthusiastic about. I know St. Gabriel was pretty punk.
Yeah.
St. Gabriel. He was pretty punk. I mean, the one that I'm super enthusiastic about right now is St. Olga of Alaska.
Yeah. Yes.
She has recently been put forward to be canonized. I guess technically she's not a saint yet, but I think next summer she will be. And so if you don't know about her life, she was just a simple matushka, priest's wife in this tiny little village of 1,000 people, Kwethluk, Alaska, like off the grid. You can't even drive there. I mean, it's just it's like middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And she just quietly served and cared for the ladies in that village, knitting, socks for the babies. She was a midwife. She died in obscurity, just like living this simple village life in Alaska. After her death, people started having visitations of her in their dreams, and it all had to do with people that had suffered severe, maybe sexual trauma and abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And she was working incredible healing in the lives of people experiencing incredible trauma. And, I could go on and on, but there's just amazing stories about the first people that started, having dreams about her and kind of getting to know her, didn't even know who this person was.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started talking to people and visiting Orthodox churches and finding out about the church in Alaska. And then all of a sudden it started making sense. Like, oh my gosh, what you're describing is the dream that I had.
Really?
Because in this dream, I was taken to this little hut, and like all of these like little tiny details that have to do with, I think, Yupik culture.
Okay.
I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I just encourage you all to go onto the interwebs and, look up Matrushka Olga. And a lot of people have been praying for this canonization. And so the bishops announced it, I think, about 3 or 4 months ago, that she will be canonized. So she'll be the first female Orthodox saint from North America. And she's just amazing. We have an icon of her in our parish.
Brody, the guy who asked that question, says that was his very first icon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that yet another, so to go back to that, because I know very little about her, because Synaxis podcast they came on our show once and they did a review, because they reviewed the movie Sacred Alaska, I believe it's called. It's about her.
Oh yeah.
And they did a bit of a review about her. So I hadn't really heard much about her before that. And then I looked her up a little bit. So what you were just talking about there, so the people that were having these dreams, they had no idea, they had never met her. They didn't know anything about Orthodoxy. They didn't know who she was, and she was in their dreams.
Right. Yeah. This one lady in particular, like she didn't know about Orthodoxy or anything. And she started having these dreams. And this woman came to her in her dream, took her into this, kind of moss covered house, and threw some herbs on this fire. And she had experienced a bunch of sexual trauma as a young person. And so it was like, it had to do with that trauma. And she woke up just really feeling like she had been healed from some of that. And then it was like 6 months later, She was visiting an Orthodox church, and then started seeing some things about Alaska, and then started hearing about the stories of this woman, Matushka Olga. And when she saw a picture of her, she said, "Oh my gosh, that's the woman that was in my dream. That's her."
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then so eventually she became Orthodox. Eventually she traveled up to Alaska, met Matushka Olga's family.
Mhm.
And so for Matushka Olga's family to hear this story from this woman in New York who had this dream about their mom and grandmother,
Wow.
it's really just kind of amazing. So there's also on the OC website, there's a great little mini documentary that the Bishop of Alaska had filmed, because after the canonization was announced, the bishop traveled to Kwethluk, Alaska,
Mhm.
and he met with the elders of the village to ask them, because obviously, Kwethluk, Alaska can't host thousands of people for her canonization.
Right. Of
So
course,
everybody had been pushing for, well, why don't we bring her body to Anchorage? We can have this big event. But after listening to the elders and listening to those in the village, they said it's against Yupik culture to take a body outside of the village. It always needs to stay in the
Okay.
village.
Okay.
So after listening to the elders, they decided that they were going to just keep her there, and that they were going to build a little chapel there for her there, and do the canonization services there in Kwethluk.
That's
And they're gonna-
that's awesome.
Yeah, they're trying to raise money for a hostel that they can, build for, as people from all over the world will come and travel to Kwethluk, Alaska.
That's awesome. I'm gonna look that. You said that mini documentary is on the OCA website. I think you posted
Yeah, I think
it.
it's on the OSA website.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, either you or Father Justin posted something like that a while back. I think I can find it there. OCA. Okay, I'm gonna find that.
Yeah, I think I might have posted it.
Okay, man.
Which is pretty neat, just that the bishop was willing to listen. The bishop was willing to
Absolutely.
go there to the village and listen. Yeah,
Absolutely. Like even leaving the corpse there, her reposed body there. That's
Right.
that's her remains. Sorry, I'm still new to the terminology sometimes. That's a big deal too, to even respect the community, because that's not always the
Right.
case. Oftentimes they'll
Right.
say, well, in Orthodox culture, we do such and such, and we're just going to do this. But to even respect the elders of the community, to keep it that's pretty great. That's pretty great.
yeah.
Any more questions, Manny?
Yes. Orthodox Review asks, when are you going to visit Wilmington again?
That must be Raphael.
It is. I think you just made his day.
The question is Raphael gonna come up to our church for our consecration in September?
That's a good question. Are you, my dear friend? I think
Yeah.
I think you have an invitation. Also, Daniel. I don't know if Daniel's come out to meet you yet, but we were talking about, because he's in North Carolina.
Right. Yeah,
I was like-
we've communicated a little bit.
Yeah.
He's about 3 hours from me, so hopefully
I was
we'll
excited
try
to hear about that.
Actually, Daniel, I will be in Asheville in the first week of October, because we're going to bring 2 of my kids to see the Violent Femmes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so jealous.
Yeah,
So is that their
excited.
first
They're
time?
gonna play their first 2 It'll be my first time seeing them, and they're playing their first 2 albums.
Oh, the best. That's the best. Oh, Father, you're in for a treat. They're incredible live. They're, as I'm sure you already, you can imagine, they're insane live. They're actually better live than they are on. Well, the early albums are so great. Those first 2 albums are ridiculous. They're just ridiculous.
Right.
I love that we both love the Violent Femmes, because it's amazing. I love
When
it.
you
It's so good.
when you played Country Death Song that one night, I just was like, oh my gosh, I got to get on.
Yeah.
That's when I started joining the chat.
Yeah, it's great, because there was I think some of the first episodes we ever did. I played what what I can't remember what it was. American Music, and everybody in the chat went nuts because, like, everyone knows that song. All the Gen Xers were like losing it. Tatiana, Buck Johnson, everybody was just losing it in the chat. They're like, "Oh, I can't believe you're playing this." Oh, sorry. Now we're just geeking out on music a little bit. Speaking of which,
well, I have an 18-year-old son. I have an 18-year-old son that's a student at University of North Carolina in Asheville. So,
okay, that's awesome.
There.
That's awesome. That's going to be great. I want to hear a full review when you get back from that. Also, your kids' review, because are they familiar with the Femmes?
Oh, they are. They've grown up like, hearing mom and dad like cook in the kitchen, like screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yes.
Yay,
Awesome.
After day. They're used to.
That's so good. I love it. I love that we geek out on these things. Speaking of which, your playlist was pretty interesting. If at any point you want to play one of those or two of those songs, we should do that. Actually, I have a song I want you to tell me a little bit about at some point. Maybe we should do it now. We'll take a little break from the questions. I'll play you a song. I want you to tell me about the song. Is that okay? Are you like nervous? You're like, what's he gonna play? Let me see. I had it set up, but then being that it is so SOS, it's completely unorganized. Okay, here we go. There's a particular reason, not just because of the guitar. Is that echoey? You obviously know this song.
Like guitar in this one.
Yeah, I know. Is that a nylon string guitar? Like a classical guitar?
Classical.
Did it?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a cool story about kind of how that one of those magic studios.
That's why I wanted to bring it up. So for everyone in the audience that doesn't know, this is obviously Luxury, and we're going to talk about the song in just a second. When's the last time you heard this song?
Gosh. A few years.
You guys are always good at that hang, that emotional hanging.
Immortality.
Yeah. There's a reason why I brought this. Yeah. So that was off the latest and greatest, and that was the album that you guys recorded after the accident, correct?
Yeah, that was the album that, right after the accident. So a lot of those songs had to do with kind of working through, I think, the trauma of that experience.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about this
Yeah,
song in particular.
Well, this song, it's like, we had to come up with more songs. So we're sitting there in the studio, and I had just that, I had that classical guitar out, and I was just strumming that out in the sound room, the big room. And the engineer, Dave Barbie, came out, and he's like, keep playing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally copied from Sweet Jane. I mean, it's the same chords.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Sweet Jane.
Now that you mentioned, I could see that. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and so I just kept playing it, and he started miking it up, and then he got a bass drum out for the drummer, and he had mallets, and then he had Lee go over to the piano and just start playing some things, and Father James, Jamie had his guitar out, and it's one of those things that just kind of happened live in the studio, and then Lee wound up putting some lyrics on it, and so it's more of like a, I don't know, like a prayer. I know I always kind of thought of that song more as a prayer, but the lyrics are very simple, and I think it's a reference to marriage at first. So he says, "Till death do us part," demons say, "but death matters not to you and me," because as Orthodox, we don't believe that it's till death do us part. It's eternal. Right. In this terrible ocean, in this terrible sea, we are pearls. Kind of talking about, I get, the struggle of marriage in this crazy world we live in, but then links it back to, the marriage of Christ and the church. And, he just keeps repeating, taste the fountain of immortality, taste the fountain of immortality, taste the fountain. And it kind of fades, on that. So it's just kind of more of a, I don't know, kind of like a mantra sort of thing. Yeah. And it just kind of happened in the studio. I mean, we hadn't really written it ahead of time. It was just something that I had been kind of playing with in my in my room or something, yeah.
Well, those are the best songs. Obviously, everybody in a band or any musician will tell you those songs that just come out of nowhere that you just kind of piece together in the moment are the best. And and also like the keeping in mind the situation that you guys had just come out of, and with the accident, trying to deal with all this stuff, a song like that kind of will let all of that out, just because it's of the moment. You're not thinking about it. You're kind of making it up on the spot. So I could see that also, because I'm sure that time period of kind of the accident and then coming out of that, healing, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, of course, because I mean that must have taken a toll on everyone's families, marriages.
Right, we were all married. We were all married at that time. We were all married pretty young, and that put a toll on our marriages. The wives weren't terribly excited when we went back on tour, for that second album, and
of course,
yeah,
it's beautiful. That's why I wanted to play that particular song. It's also that album. I just started listening to it last week. As I said during our interview, I'm taking my time with Luxury, and I just started listening to that album. Like I've heard the album before, but like actually paying attention to it and how it's structured, the stories you guys are telling on the album, and the instrumentation is different. It's far more serious, obviously, after situations like that. But there's also this cathartic release.
Well, it's funny. Well, we tried to arrange that album, back in the day when we had tapes and albums, it was two-sided. So we really intentionally arranged that album. Side A was the rockin' side, and side B was the quiet side.
Yeah.
And so we arranged the songs that way. So the side A is much more sassy, and, kind of poking at things.
Yes.
Kind of classic Luxury. And then the second side was really the reflective side, and us working through, like the song "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings" is really all about the accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow God is good, God is loving. Just when I lost it all, I gained
Mm-hmm.
everything, and then it like kicks back in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about, I think Father David, working through,
Mm.
the trauma of the accident, being face to face with death, and he
Yep.
was the one that by far was the most seriously injured. And
Yep.
so yeah, that album was really working through a lot of that. But the early part of the album, like there's a song on there, where is it? Metropolitan.
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah.
it was kind of poking at, I don't know, kind of America and the things that we hold so dear in America. Just very,
Yeah. It's
he was very
even the opening
influenced
track.
by Morrissey. And
Yes. So I
Yeah,
was just
go
going to say
ahead.
that sorry, because the latency. My apologies. I'm not trying to interrupt. The opening
Yeah.
tracks, even the declaration of what is it? It's so great. The declaration, like it's amazing. It just comes out.
Yeah, I'm the
blasting.
greatest.
I'm
The
the
world should know
greatest.
that by now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally tongue in cheek.
It is, and that's what I like about Father Dave's lyrics. Even it's mentioned in the documentary, but in general, just reading some of them, you're not really sure what he means. But if you kind of put it into the context of where he's coming from, it makes sense. It makes sense. So you guys say that you're not, you don't put the orthodoxy into the, but I could see it there, even in what you just described.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
just not
no,
overt. It's just not overt.
Right. It's all over. I mean, certainly,
Yes.
we were already moving towards orthodoxy at that point, and
Yes.
so it's all over it. But you would have to kind of know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little legend key. If you don't have the legend key, it doesn't make sense. But if you have the legend key, you can read the map. It's pretty awesome. I really like it.
Right. Totally.
Manny, are there any more questions for Father Christopher?
There's two.
Two more questions.
Tatiana asks,
All right.
can you pray for my church, St. Raphael's in Quincy, Illinois? We don't have a priest right now. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely will. And I think I discovered that. I think you sent me a friend request this week. And then when I saw pictures of your church, I knew that it was Quincy. The interesting thing is when my third year of seminary, I didn't know where I was going to go. And Quincy, Illinois was one of the first options.
Oh, wow.
On the docket. I remember talking to the missions director of the Diocese of the Midwest about the Quincy parish. And so there's always been kind of a special place in my heart for that parish in Quincy. So I will definitely be praying for you all, and that you'll find a priest, because that's actually the closest parish to where Cornerstone Music Festival used to be.
Is that a coincidence, or you're like, maybe I'll go back to Cornerstone, I'll be a priest here?
Well, I mean,
I'm just kidding.
There was a sense of because Cornerstone was still going on when I graduated.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, that would be so great. We could have this outreach to Cornerstone, which we wound up doing. A bunch of us went back the last 2 years of Cornerstone, I think 2011 and 2012. And we had a table set up. We brought all the Death of the World magazine.
I have a picture of that. Hold on. I'm going to send it to Manny. Keep talking.
Okay. And St. Tikhon Seminary donated a bunch of books, and we just basically set up in the merch tent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was like low hanging fruit. I mean, is what it was, is because so many people were hungry.
Yep.
And we talked to Japuza. We knew that the Jesus People USA were really big on we got to include everybody. So we had Vespers and Matins every day.
Really?
We did a divine liturgy on the feast day of St. John the Wonder Worker. We had divine liturgy at Cornerstone, and we invited people. And after every Vespers, we would give a talk. And to this day, I still get emails. In fact, I got this awesome email. This was about, 8 years ago. I get this email from this guy, and he's like, I don't know if you remember me, but we met you at Cornerstone. We sat out on the grass and talked for 4 hours And I just want you to pray for me because not only am I Orthodox, but I'm being ordained a deacon this weekend.
Get out of here! Wow, that's incredible.
So
See, that's the beauty of this.
Yeah, so he's a deacon in at Christ the Savior in Chicago, Illinois now.
That's incredible. Is that your booth there?
Yep, that's our booth right there.
Yeah. See, like for the audience,
well, that might be the booth. Yeah, Death to the World went a few times before that.
Okay.
And then we kind of picked up the mantle and continued it because they come. So I don't know which year that was. That might have been the year before we went.
I also found a small I was going to show it to Father John Valadez and a few others. There was also I found a little clip of some, I guess he's Protestant. He did like some sort of some show for Cornerstone, discovering the first Death to the World, and he's like going through it and he talks about it. It's interesting to hear him talking about it. So it's at Cornerstone. I don't know if he's like a journalist or whatever, or he's part of Cornerstone, and he's talking about finding this Orthodox zine and everything. It's pretty interesting. I think that's the beauty of what we're doing here.
Yeah, well, and so many people at Cornerstone, it was all the fringe groups. Like these were people that didn't fit in kind of the mainstream Christian world. So there were people that were just so hungry. And so many of the folks at Cornerstone were people that the only connection left to Christianity was that little subculture.
Yes.
And so many of those people have since deconstructed and have left Christianity, but so many of those have also discovered orthodoxy. So I felt like being at Cornerstone, having our Orthodox outreach table was like, well, before you leave Christianity altogether, have you considered orthodoxy? Maybe the God that you're rejecting is, a Protestant, Calvinistic God, which, we don't believe in.
It's true. It's true because even seeing Christianity from this other lens, this other perspective, the closer to the root perspective, the pre-denominational perspective, it is eye-opening. It is jarring. I mean, I know for myself, like as people know my story, but like being cradle Orthodox and then re-encountering my faith from this other perspective, it really helped. It really helped a lot to see. So like things like Cornerstone, outreach in that way, luxury, Death to the World, and all of these types of avenues. Even having Mackay pictures with yourself or with Justin Marler, it raises questions, and people start to ask a lot of questions, and they'll say, well, what is this? Like, I don't understand what this is. And then it kind of opens the door for us to kind of, say, well, go talk to a priest. Are you near a church? You can go visit a priest and they can tell you a little bit more. But until you get there, check out Death to the World, or maybe here's a luxury CD, or, here's the Quick and the Dead, those kinds of, like a friend of mine was tuning in just randomly, not Orthodox, from the punk rock community I grew up in. He's like, what's Mano up to nowadays? And then he just tuned into SOS randomly. And he's like, he sends me this message. Who is this? I was like, who is what? Who's what? And he starts sending me snapshots of and it was Quick and the Dead. It's a project Justin Marler did. And it's like a punk album. And he's like, this is Orthodox? I'm like, yeah, they're hymns put to punk. And the guy who wrote who's performing, he was a monk, and he was in this band Sleep. He's like, Sleep Gelman Street Sleep. I'm like, yeah, that guy. And he's like, who? The guy Justin Marler who left? I'm like, yeah, he left and he did this thing. He did what thing? So I started sending him Death to the World, and then last week, so at first he kind of laughed it off, and then a couple of weeks ago he's like, so do you do this radio show every Sunday? I was like, well, yeah. And then do you always play Orthodox music? I'm not always, but often, like, I have just shows where it's just Orthodox. So I sent them a playlist of all you guys, like all bunch of bands, and I'm just waiting for his response. I know he's gonna love it. So I think that's an important thing. Sorry for the ramble. I think it's important. Yeah,
for sure. It's funny you mentioned Gilman Street. I got to tell my little Gilman Street story.
Yes.
So I've listened in on some of your other I think when you had Buck Johnson on, you guys were talking about Gilman Street, and being raised in Atlanta, I mean, the common theme is maximum rock and roll. So every week or every month, I'd buy maximum rock and roll. And the thing that was so great about that zine is it had scene reports from all over the country and all over the world. So you could see like, oh, there's all these little scenes in all these different towns and everybody's supporting each other. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I would read scene reports. I'd get the Lookout Records ads. And, of course, when I first heard Operation Ivy and like all of that, I was like, oh my gosh. So when I was, ninth grade, 10th grade, I was visiting a friend of mine who lived in Sacramento that I went on a mission trip with that previous summer. So for spring break, it was my first time flying across the country on my own. He picked me up in San Francisco and I said, yeah, we got to go to Gilman Street. So we like drove to Gilman Street and, you had to pay like, I don't know, like $1 and you got like a membership for the year or something. And so we went to a show there that night, and it was a band called Corrupted Morals, which was Billy Joe from Green Day. That was his earlier band. Yeah. And a band called Attitude Adjustment that I think that was kind of big out there. So that was like my first experience of Gilman, because here I was in Atlanta, like, oh, I knew about this scene in Berkeley. And then to go to Gilman Street was almost like, I don't know, going on pilgrimage. It sounds funny to say it that way. But I think then becoming Orthodox, it's like, that's that same desire for like a connection to a community that we're all part of.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yep.
That was just an embryonic form in that kind of, punk rock underground, but then becoming Orthodox, it's like, oh, but it's about Christ. And so we can go all over the world. Like I went to Russia 5 years ago on a trip, an official delegation, and got to visit all the holy sites there and just have this sense of like, wow, we are all connected around the world by this common faith in much the same way, in this little weird kind of embryonic form. That's what I was longing for all along when I discovered, the punk scene. Here are these little communities, but now it's centered around Christ and not just around some band or something.
It's very true, and I think like I mentioned in the interview, that's the common thread I've found with anyone that's come from punk to Orthodoxy, from priest to laity to monk. The common thread is looking for truth, looking for real community, and like dealing with situations in the world. Like that's the common thread, and I think that for a lot of people, when especially in the early days of punk in the 80s and the 90s and maybe even the 70s, people got into it for those reasons. It wasn't just the aesthetic, it wasn't how you looked, it wasn't how you sounded. It was kind of like, what do you bring to the table, what do you bring to the community, and what can you contribute? So I think you nailed it there. And it's connection, the human connection, the reality of like congregating in that sort of way. And then adding Christ to the whole equation. I found the same feeling you described when I found Orthodoxy again. It felt the same kind of warmth, but even better, even bigger, and more potential. As obviously, it's safe to say. And Gelman Street and their whole project there is a big. It's what we kind of use almost as a blueprint for a lot of the things that we're trying to do. With Christ obviously in mind. That's our number one intended goal, to build that community, especially what you just mentioned with the maximum rock and roll. See that there's other scenes throughout the world. You're not alone. There's other people that have these same beliefs. So for us, I think it's beautiful. That's the beauty of art, right? It translates that message pretty clear. Or I hope so.
Right.
Manny, any more questions for Father Christopher?
Yep, we got one more. Eastern Orthodox short reading says, would you say the work as prayer is an unceasing prayer? And would you value one over the other, work as prayer versus the Jesus prayer?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way I think about it is, I wouldn't compare the two. Like I was saying in the interview, there's different registers that we can speak about prayer, and all are equally prayer. And I think that if we're doing our work as unto the Lord, that in a sense can be that unceasing prayer. You know, it is fulfilling St. Paul's edict to pray without ceasing. I think the Jesus prayer certainly is a part of all of that. But I wouldn't put them as like, here's one over here and here's one here. I think they're just all a part of the same work we do as unceasing prayer. And if one is able to say the Jesus prayer in the midst of their work and their life, that's great. But I think there is some sense of, like, I'm trying to think of the example. I think Father Thomas Hopko in one of his talks, talked about there was this guy who had like 6 kids, and he was so focused on doing his prayer rule and doing his Jesus prayer that like he would leave his wife to take care of like these 8 kids while he went off and did his unceasing prayer, doing the 100 Jesus prayers and doing his prayer rule. And he went to his spiritual father and told him, "Oh, Father, I've been doing unceasing prayer." And he explained to him what he was doing, and his spiritual father was like, "What? No, your prayer is to go back home and take care of those kids and love your wife. That is your unceasing prayer." Rather than, I don't know, for this guy doing the Jesus prayer and abandoning his, his responsibilities, it ceased to be prayer, even though he was doing it, if that makes any sense. So, I wouldn't really put them as like one against the other or as one better than the other. I think it's more this attitude that our whole life becomes this unceasing prayer. And sometimes that means saying prayers and doing our prayer rule in front of our icons. Sometimes that means using our prayer rope and doing the Jesus prayer. And sometimes it means just simply being present to the people that are right in front of us, the job, the family that's right in front of us, not, trying to, kind of like run away from like the stuff that's right in front of you in the name of prayer. Like, then that's not prayer. Like I mentioned the St. John Cashin quote, we have to always be outside of prayer what we are when we are praying. Otherwise, we're not praying at all when we are praying.
Yep. Can I ask you a question about prayer, since this came up, because it's something that I've been like, this, I guess it's more of a personal question, but there's been times recently where I find it harder to pray, meaning that not that I don't want to, I really want to, and I want to, but then, so I just force myself to do it. Right. And sometimes I can't really hone in on anything while I'm doing it. Do you have any suggestions for someone I don't know if that makes any sense. Like, I want to pray and I don't want to have an excuse for it, but I don't know how to go about it. Do I force myself? Do I just kind of do what I can? So what I've been doing is that I just do the Jesus prayer if I'm going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it really depends on the situation and the person. And, I think there are times where we do just need to kind of suck it up and do it because it is effort. Yes. But then I think other times, I think we go through different seasons where, maybe we need to kind of pull back on our prayer rule a little bit and just focus on consistency rather than, quality, like, not quantity, like, maybe just kind of shorten the prayer rule for a little bit so I can just keep it going rather than, oh man, I just can't do it and I'm feeling discouraged and life's so busy right now and da 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 da. Well, I think it always has to be something that's doable.
Yep.
But just one smidge past that.
I love it. That's good, like workout advice.
Right. So it's like, it's something that's very easily and doable. So like when like I just had somebody in my office today, like, Father, what prayer book should I get? How should I start? I'm like, just do the Trisagion prayers through the Our Father.
Yep.
And just do that for 30 days. And if you can do that consistently, then we can start adding more things to it. Like, the fathers say short prayers said often work more for the soul than long prayers said once every 2 weeks.
Beautiful.
So just establishing that habit of prayer and then we can start to kind of hang more things on it. But like, like a woman who, maybe has a newborn and she's up at all hours of the night having to, feed the baby and all of that. I tell them, like, I mean, in a sense that becomes your prayer rule for a time.
Oh, yeah,
of
that's
just,
beautiful. Yeah.
Tending to that newborn child that needs that attention. And you know what?
Yeah.
Maybe in the middle of the night when you're nursing that baby, maybe that's a great time to do the Jesus prayer as well. But, just tending to the needs of that child, in a sense, that's producing within you the same thing that under kind of normal circumstances, a good solid, prayer rule would do, under normal circumstances. So, I think sometimes it's more intentional and using the prayer book and standing in front of your icons. I think other times, it's through serving and loving and kind of our life is prayer.
That's really, I like that a lot. So another question that came to mind, because I know a lot of people in my audience, and it's the case for Manny and myself as well. We don't have access to a church. We like easily we can't actually access a church easily. So like when I get a lot of questions from people that are Orthodox curious or want to actually take it serious, and the first thing I tell them is go to a church, speak to a priest. If they can't, sometimes I'll find someone online that is a priest to put them in contact with. Do you have any advice for someone that wants to take the next step but doesn't have a church nearby, or doesn't even know which jurisdiction to go to?
Right. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter which jurisdiction it is. I mean, it's all orthodoxy, and there's a really good website, at least in North America, called Orthodoxy in America, and it has a map, and you click on the map and you put in your zip code or whatever, and like it'll tell you where all of the Orthodox churches are of all jurisdictions, and you'd be surprised actually how many there are.
Right.
I think if somebody is living like 3 hours away or 2 hours away, I mean, one does have to, have some type of relationship, I think, with a priest or a spiritual father, or, to have some connection with someone who's rooted in the faith and kind of represents the faith. I think, sometimes online orthodoxy, it's like, anybody, like Mano can start a YouTube page and like, and I just think it's, and you have incredible wisdom to, impart to us. But, I think it's just important that, one is connected to somehow a local parish. So even if it's just a priest who is in a parish 2 hours away, maybe find that priest who is at the one 2 hours away, as opposed to the one that's, across the country, that you've connected with. There's nothing wrong with having those conversations, but I think the more that one can connect with kind of the local incarnational, because our Orthodox faith is lived out in a real parish with real people, with a real priest, with, the sacramental life there. And, so I'd say most people live within somewhat of a driving distance to that. But if one doesn't, then to try to find people at least in a geographic area, or finding a community like this, finding like-minded Orthodox Christians, and, find some encouragement. And
That's
I think advice. Somebody posted that there, orthodoxinamerica.org. Yeah, that's a great resource.
That was Manny. We're gonna make sure that's in the description when I put this episode out on Thursday.
And they have an app as well that you can put on your phone, and it's great.
Same website?
Yeah, well, it's an app. I think it's Orthodoxy in America. If you go to the App Store, for
all right, I'll
iPhones
look for that too. Awesome, thank you. Manny, is there any more questions for Father Christopher? Nope. Okay. Did you want to go through any of your tracks that you had on the playlist, Father, or did you want to continue talking? This is totally your show at this moment. Everyone's loving everything you're saying, by the way. I don't know if you can see the chats, but everybody's taken back by your.
Well, I'm going back over to the chat and just kind of looking.
Yeah, you're
I don't
getting a
want to
lot
bore
of love.
people, but
You are absolutely not boring people. I could tell you from the counter, we have a good counter going, and everyone's saying a lot of great things. They're feeling this. They're feeling this very much. I think a lot of people need to have these kinds of or hear these conversations from a priest, of course, and be able to ask questions and kind of realize that was a big eye opener for me, was how down to earth a lot of the priests are, and how you're just normal people. Like, I know that might sound weird to some people, but it's real people with real struggles and real situations. And I think it's really important for people to see that side of priests. I really do, because I remember Manny. I told this story when I was interviewing Father John Valadez. Manny Vanamides, Manny, the guy that my nephew that helps me with the show. He was raised Roman Catholic, and when he first started encountering a lot of the Orthodox priests, he's like, they're just like normal people, like. And I was like, yeah, what do you mean? And it didn't occur to me, because I grew up amongst Orthodox priests, like, yeah, they're normal people with families and this and that. Because he grew up Roman Catholic, so there's like a little bit more of a distance. And when I met some more Roman Catholic priests, I was like, oh yeah, there's a difference. There's totally a difference. So I think it's really important to see that you guys are real, obviously real people, but like people with families and fathers and husbands and passions for music and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all about Christ and coming back to that and building to that. I think it's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And one of my favorite books, this is another little book plug, Father Alexander Schmeman's journals are published. And what I found so refreshing about his journals is exactly what you just said. Is he just like, I don't know, he just talks about, walking from the seminary back to his house on a fall afternoon and just being taken in by the beauty of that walk. He loved classical music. He'd go down into the city, into New York, and see the opera and classical music. And he would just talk about just being so like enraptured by his experience of music. He loved literature. He loved art. He loved poetry. He loved all the Russian poets, and and he was passionate about it. And so to me, like, I read that and it's like, oh, okay. Like, he's a normal person who's a part of his culture. He's a product of where he's come from. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes within Orthodoxy, because I remember that early on in my journey, it's like what I loved about Orthodoxy was like, growing up in America, my parents' generation kind of threw off all the kind of the culture we've come from. And Foley's an Irish name, but I didn't know anything about being Irish. That was just like, whatever, we're just Americans. And, and I think part of Orthodoxy was like, oh, here's a culture that I can be a part of. But I think sometimes as converts to Orthodoxy, we start to like take on some of the cultural trappings of Orthodoxy. Like, we have to become like Greek peasants or 19th century Russian peasants or something. And it's like we take on something that's not really indigenous to who we are. And so it feels inauthentic. Like, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in the punk scene, and I love Orthodoxy. Like, what does that mean? I'm in North Carolina. Okay, well, from a missiological perspective, it means like, okay, we want to maybe offer an English language Orthodoxy that's trying to be an indigenous expression in the South of America. But then that means that, just like Matushka told me when I was nervous about the movie coming out, like, this is your story. Just be integrated. Like, we all need to be integrated. We all need to like embrace our story, where we're from. Now that we're Orthodox, like, okay, like, let's not, I don't know, kind of like take on some cultural trapping that's really not indigenous to who we are, but still be Orthodox. I don't know. I could kind of ramble about that. Part of my undergraduate degree was in missiology. So I'm kind of always thinking about these missiological things.
I think you should keep going, because I know that this has been an ongoing conversation that we've had in the chats. We've had it's come up many times on the podcast. And from the specifics are either the cradle Orthodox mentality of like, culture, it's Greek, it's Russian, it's Serbian, blah, blah, and they're like a little bit close knit. Not all, but there is that camp. And then which I don't agree with, and I never did. And then there's the other side that comes in with a Protestant approach, and they want to change a few things here or there, like we discussed privately. But then there's the reality of American Orthodox. And I think this is something that's not, it's starting to be talked about, but I think it's something that we need to go a little bit deeper with, because that's bringing on a culture of its own. So like the Greek, Russian, and Serbian flavor is very different. But then there's an American side, which is now starting to bubble up. And I think that's something that we should all understand, have conversation about, so we don't make mistakes, but also appreciate, because I think you're right. If you just showed up at my house and you just started talking to me with a Greek accent, I'd be a little bit like weirded out. I'm like, Father, you don't need to be Greek. You know what I mean? It'd be a little weird.
Holy, what's going on here?
Exactly. So yeah, go into it.
Well, like the flip side too, like we don't want to create a, what was the heresy that was condemned, Philetism or whatever, kind of defining orthodoxy just through our ethnic experience. I think in a way, there can also be in the convert world, we can kind of create this kind of like American orthodoxy that is its own kind of, we don't want anybody that's bringing in anything Russian or Greek or whatever. And that's a flip side of the same thing. That's a problem too.
Very true.
I mean, what does it mean to be American Orthodox? I mean, I think it'll look like America or Canada, or I guess in some respects, Mexico. I mean, it'll look multicultural.
Yep.
It'll be multicultural. I mean, it will have some elements of Greek and Russian and Serbian and Romanian, because that's beautiful and that's wonderful. I mean, Orthodoxy incarnated itself into those cultures so beautifully, and we don't want to just be too quick to like push that out. But at the same time, I think we do have to think, kind of like the missionaries that came to Alaska. That's what I always kind of go back to is, these first missionaries that came in the 1700s, they didn't come to make little Russians out of the Aleuts and Yupik peoples. They came to bring an indigenous Christianity to them. So the first thing they did is they translated the services, the scriptures into all of those local languages, and took some time to learn their own religious myths and all of like what was their indigenous religious language, so that they could find the touch points to bring Christ to them.
Yes.
And that's why to this day, if you go to Southern Alaska, in every little village, there's an Orthodox church, and they're worshiping in Aleut, Yupik, and Alabaskan, and English, and Slavonic, and because they made it their own. They didn't feel like that they were being, whereas the Protestant missionaries came to Alaska, and they took all of the young people out of the villages, they put them into schools, and they wouldn't let them speak their tribal languages. They wouldn't let them worship in an Orthodox context, because they wanted to make little European Protestants out of them.
That's a great point.
It's just awful.
That's a fantastic point. We should do a whole episode on this.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, what does it mean to be an indigenous Orthodox in America? I think we are just we're like too close to it. We're in the middle of an experience that I think maybe 200 years we'll look back on. And we're just in this very kind of experimental stage of, different Orthodox composers are working on different music that kind of sounds American, bringing in kind of Appalachian melodies. But even that, like, is that what it means to be American? Is just Appalachian melodies,
Right.
And so, like, for instance, our choir director at our parish, he's like a world-renowned violinist, musician, professional musician, and he's so talented. But when I play him some of these like Appalachian Orthodox chants that are being circulated, he's just like, "Oh my gosh, this is awful." He just feels like that's trying. It's just trying too hard. It's trying too hard to like,
Yeah.
let's make Orthodoxy
Yeah. I agree.
American. Where like
I agree.
historically these things just happen organically
Yep.
over a period of time. And for him, it just sounds like bad country music.
Yeah, and it's also like when you just see it like it's kind of like the pop punk example that I was giving with Buck. You can hear when it happens organically, and you can hear when it's like a caricature. You're playing a part, and you're trying to force something in there. For example, Justin Marler's a band, the Sabians. They have a couple of tracks out where the melody is clearly ecclesiastical, but it doesn't sound like it. It's not it happened organically. You could tell like they didn't sit there going, how can we do this so that it sounds like they just made this the thing, right? And I think that's a good point you brought up. Also, the point of Alaska, where the Orthodox didn't go in there and force the population to take on their ways. It reminds me of the first time I saw icons from around the world, like Orthodox icons from around the world. And like there's the Japanese icons, and all of the Christ is Japanese, everybody's Japanese in it. And I was like, well, of course, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like when I started to think about it, and then seeing the difference between how the Orthodox approach rather than the Protestant approach, as you just described, I never thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. But I think you made a lot of good points there. What is it I guess we're Orthodox first and foremost. And if that's our intention and our way of life, the cultural aspects of it is an add-on. It's an add-on of how to deliver the message, let's say, or, through tradition, through language, through art and all that.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as a convert, I've been Orthodox now almost, probably close to 30 years in terms of like when I started my journey. But, I guess I've seen like certain fads come through over the years of, particularly amongst convert Orthodox. And, like I've come to appreciate like some of those ethnic small t traditions that I have seen in my parish. Like, in our parish, like we've really adopted kind of the whole Pascha basket thing. That's more kind of a Slavic, kind of bringing your baskets after Pascha and getting them blessed. And, there's this whole traditional way of having the meat and the Pascha cheese and all of these things. And some of our people do that, and it's wonderful and great. But, we're in the South. So, people are also bringing barbecue and putting in the Pascha basket. And awesome. Instead of vodka, they're bringing bourbon.
That's awesome.
It's like, to me, that's like this beautiful, just more organic way of just, we're taking something from within the tradition.
Yes.
And kind of making it our own in a very organic way, rather than it being like, we are in the South, so we should have our Pascha baskets have these things. It would feel forced.
Yes.
It's just something that is just naturally, I think born kind of out of the experience of the church.
Yeah, it reminds me of one.
And that's the thing about Orthodox missionaries. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it just reminded me of this one Pascha where my Serbian friends came over, my Russian friends came over, and the Italian side of my family all came over, and we all like, oh, what do you guys do? We do this, and then we started sharing different meals or cracking our eggs differently. They're like, no, we do it this way. No, we do it this way. We have this bread, and then there was this moment where I saw the ladies sitting there showing the different Easter breads. So the Serbs, the Russians, and the Greeks, and they were all kind of the same. Right? Like they look different, but they're the same. They're like, so on this, we kind of agreed on the same rules on this. And then watching the non-Orthodox kind of going like, what is happening here? Why is Easter such a big deal? I'm like, it's the biggest deal. It's the biggest deal. You know what I mean? So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just
it's the total big.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's
no, I just Yeah, I mean, there's a great book by Father Luke Veronis called Monks, Missionaries, and Martyrs.
Oh,
And it
great
was, I
title.
think, his doctoral thesis on Orthodox missiology. And so
Hmm.
he does a really nice survey of Orthodox missionaries over the years and what they've done. So, obviously he talks about St. Herman of Alaska and the Alaskan missionaries, but he also talks about like St. Stephen of Perm, who went out into the Siberia and, kind of learned the indigenous languages of the people.
Hmm.
Talks about St. Cyril and Methodius when they, went and developed, they basically
Yes.
developed the Cyrillic alphabet as a
Yep.
missionary language,
Yep.
taking
Yep.
Greek and going to, I guess, what's modern day Bulgaria at the time, and
Yep.
basically brought Christianity to an illiterate group.
Hmm.
They learned their language. They developed an alphabet in order to bring Christianity to them. And so, again, it wasn't about turning them into, little Byzantines. They were,
Yes.
they
Yes.
wanted to bring Christianity to them in an indigenous way. And so I
Yep.
think that's what's really important. And I guess it kind of circles back around to kind of music and art.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
that's why, kind of luxury, we just never felt like
Hmm.
we were kind of using our art in order to, I don't know, convert people or something. We were just
Yeah.
being present in the cultural moment that we found ourselves in.
Hmm.
And,
Makes sense.
and now people are getting interested in orthodoxy because of it, which is kind of in spite of us.
No, but that's how it happens. That's how it happens real, where it takes root. You know what I mean? You put it in fertile soil. When the person's ready,
Yeah.
it'll make sense. And I don't remember which interview it was. I heard Father David Lee Bozeman say that he doesn't write about stuff he really cares about. So it's something like that. I'm totally paraphrasing in terms of his lyrical writing. Not that he doesn't care about, but that the personal things. I think he said
Right.
something like that. And I was like, that's as someone that writes lyrics. I'm like, okay, why? And then when he gave his explanation, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a totally way of thinking. So now when I'm writing lyrics, I'm thinking, is this too personal? Is it too close? So it's second guessing it, but it also helps with this this conversation we're having, where through the music of luxury and other artists like that, people might be like, oh, they're Orthodox. What's that all about? Like I was introduced to a new musician called Doug Burr, and he's in Texas, and he's on the same record label as Lee Bozeman, as Father Dave. They're on the same record label. I just found out. And his music's amazing, and I had no idea he was Orthodox. And a friend of mine, I sent him one of his tracks. He's not Orthodox, the friend that I sent it to, and he just started looking into his story, because that's what guys like us do, right? Back in our day, that we always look into the band. And he's like, this guy's he's like Orthodox like you. I'm like, yeah. He's like, is that why you sent it to me? I'm like, no, the song's great. He's like, no, true, that is totally a song I would listen to. I was like, huh. What's with all these guys making really great music? Are they all Orthodox? I'm like, yeah, they are. All the ones on the list. So yeah, I thought I'd throw that in there as a little tidbit.
Yeah, I think I saw you post something about him recently, and I did a deep dive
Yeah,
one evening last week because I hadn't heard of him either. And I was
he's
like, man,
cool.
this guy is really good. I really
Yeah.
liked it.
Yeah,
this.
he's really cool. Yeah, that's the beauty. There's a lot of us out there, really talented Orthodox individuals, and it's not just about being Orthodox, but it's great that we have a community of so many talented people, that from artists to writers to musicians, and I think it's I think you said it to me once privately, and someone else has said it as well. It's the common thread that brings us together, that helps us build those bridges, something along those lines. And I think that's true. That's what we need, I think, moving forward as a community, whatever that is.
Yeah. Right.
So, Father, we're kind of at the tail end. Is there anything you want to bring up, talk about, anything you want to do? Like the floor is open to you.
No, I don't think so. I
No?
think there's just been a lot of great conversation, and yeah, I don't feel the need to turn this into SOS radio, but that would be fun to do sometime. Like if you would have me back on for an SOS,
Yeah.
radio. I think that
Okay.
would be fun. Like,
Let's do it.
yeah, do a deep dive on maybe just some songs that I don't know, mean a lot to me, but I think
Mm-hmm.
are on the same theme of some of the, like when you did that SOS radio on, I don't know, like songs that move you, like on this
Oh,
deeper
Goosebumps.
level. I can't remember what.
Yeah, the Goosebumps episode. Yeah.
And I think that's when you played Country Death Song.
I did.
There's just a handful of songs that for me
Mm-hmm.
do that. And I think
Okay.
it would just be like fun to play those and talk about
Okay.
those songs.
Let's do it. I will send you a message.
As a thinking Orthodox Christian, these are songs that aren't necessarily written by Orthodox Christians,
Mm-hmm.
but they're hitting on certain themes that I think just resonate on a deep level. These are part of our kind of cultural heritage, as
Absolutely.
you know, those from the scene and all of that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. We'll set that up 100% because there's 2 episodes I did 3 that people want. Another one is the Goosebumps. I did another one on outsider music. I was actually hoping you would tuned into that episode. That was the one.
I watched some of that. Yeah.
That one was great. I know there's like some stuff that you would have contributed to that for sure. Because I was thinking about you halfway through. There was a couple of people in my mind, and one of them was you. I'm like, oh, I bet he would love this. So maybe we should do a mix of that, like stuff that influenced you, that you love, Goosebumps, and anything that you might consider outsider in the sense that people aren't used to. They would never hear this before. I know some of the stuff on your playlist fits in that to me. When I was listening to it, I'm like, this is good. This is good.
Yeah.
You have great taste. You have a really, really great taste. Like you really do.
I don't know.
Well, you
I'm
sent me
drawn to
that
the
one.
stuff that moves me, and
Right. The latency is pretty bad now, so I'm really not trying to interrupt you. It's just like crisping in and out. So maybe we should call it a day right now because of the internet.
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. But I can hear you.
It happens. It could just be Mexico. That happens from time to time, and it gets crunchy. I don't know. That's one thing we got to do.
Maybe North Carolina too, you know.
Could be. I like how you threw the accent in there. That's awesome. North Carolina.
North Carolina. Right, we say Christ done riz, sure enough is.
That's awesome. I better get used to that because I think I might be moving to the South soon. That'd be awesome.
Learn it, man.
I gotta. Father Christopher Foley, honestly, thank you so much. I really appreciate every conversation we have. Like, you are awesome. You're well liked in our chat groups for many reasons. But one of the common comments I get about you is that you have a great way of simplifying things that people might find a little bit tough to wrap their minds around in terms of the church. And you're, if you're okay with me saying it, because I know you don't like the compliments too much, but you're wise in your delivery style, and you're very good at kind of getting the message out clearly. I don't know if you're okay with me saying that.
Glory to God. I don't know what to say.
Good answer. Thank you so much, Father. I'll send you a message. We'll definitely get you on an SOS radio episode very soon.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Well, God bless you all. Thank you.
God bless. Adios. Everybody, I think we're going to try to do an episode of SOS radio on Friday. I'll be on Mr. Westford's podcast. It's going to be an Orthodox only episode of SOS radio. Haven't done one of those in a while. And I definitely want to get back to doing those. So an SOS Orthodox only episode will probably be on Friday, I believe. I got to message Mr. Westford, our dear friend Mr. Westford, to find out when I'm going to be on there. I'll probably do it beforehand. We're guessing. The Patreon group that we're talking about doing a chat. I sent a message in Patreon, so if anyone can just let me know what the good day and time is to do like a pirate version of that, of just a conversation off the YouTube thing. So let me know about that. Check the messages in Patreon. The zine is coming together really, really quickly. If anyone has anything left that they want to submit, please do. We'll also have more episodes. If it's too many, I'm getting tired. I could feel it. It's been a long day. Get your stuff in for the zine is what I'm trying to say, and we'll touch base again on Wednesday or Thursday. Did I miss any comments that I should mention? Anything, Manny?
Yes, we got a whole bunch of super chats.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Let's go through that. 1 second. I saw something about something Wes and EPL doing something as well on the same day. Expose. Oh, that's why Wes was asking me. Yeah. So EPL, Mr. Westford, and SOS seem to be working more and more together. EPL and we will be doing something. I was actually thinking about putting a panel together with EPL, Mr. Westford. I haven't even told them, guys. I'm telling you guys. So that's something that's going to be happening, because when I was on his show on EPL, I really liked that conversation. I really enjoyed talking to Jerry. Definitely. Okay, so Gene Reeves, what's up, dude? Gene, you missed an amazing episode of punk rock, priests, and the whole nine. I will be putting out the episode on Thursday, so you can catch it then. Everybody that's in here, if you didn't see the beginning when Father Christopher Foley's reaction to me showing him the picture of him and Ian Mackay together, it's awesome. The beginning, first little bit of that interview is pretty awesome. So on Thursday, make sure you check that out if you came in late and you didn't see Father Christopher Foley's reaction. It's amazing. It's awesome. Because my goal was, like I said in the interview, to like get him and bring out the 13-year-old excitement of like, oh my God, I met Ian Mackay. So anyways, yeah. What am I missing? Manny, anything?
Looks like you're all caught up.
Super chats where you're saying something? Super?
Yes.
We're new to the sponsoring, this subscribing super chat monetizing thing. Thank you, Tatiana, so much. God bless you. Thank you so much for your love and support. Really, really, really appreciate that. We're new to all this, so I have to get used to this part of the show. Denise, hola. Thank you, Denise. Love you. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, Denise, so much for this love and support. Our dear friend Joseph Beard, my darling. How are you, brother?
This was actually his first ever super chat.
Wow. Well, Joseph Beard, we are honored. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. I'll be putting out the episodes from Board No More, which I think I've bit off way too much work. I will be getting those out on Thursday, including your episode, Joseph Beard, which was fantastic. I was editing it the other day. It's amazing. Tomorrow, I'll read that in a second. Tomorrow, don't tell too many people. I will be interviewing Cyprian from the Royal Path. It won't be live, so that's pretty exciting. I'm letting you guys know because we're gonna take this video down once it's done. We're gonna take this down or put it on private, and then I'm gonna release both of these two segments individually on Thursday after I edit them. Just let you guys know. So tomorrow, Cyprian, Royal Path. If you have some particular questions you want me to ask Cyprian, feel free to send them. We'll be focusing mostly on Bitcoin, orthodoxy, building community, the financial system, and the weird stuff that might be coming, stuff like that. Definitely going to be focusing on orthodoxy and the monarchy, stuff like that. Sorry, Manny, what was that super chat I didn't see? David Atlas, thank you, my brother. Thank you so much for your love and support, man. Honestly, I'm a little tired, so when I'm saying thank you for the love and support, I mean it, even though I don't sound like I normally do. I'm really tired today. I don't know what happened. This streaming thing takes a lot out of me, out of us. Big thanks to Manny. Everybody, huge thanks to Vanny in the chats. He's been working a little bit overtime. He's been hitting some really good strides and knocking it out of the ballpark, as the kids say. So lots of respect to that guy over there. What else? Anything else I'm missing? Any words? Everyone's saying, what's up, Manny? Vanny is the Manny. The study of stuff. You guys are slamming the home runs these last few weeks. Thank you. We are trying. To up this game. We're taking this seriously. And like I mentioned on Sunday, some things are really coming together. If I'm behind on returning any messages to anyone or any of that, I'm really sorry. Feel free to send me another message as a reminder. We have a lot of work we're dealing with right now, and we're kind of like not drowning, but we're trying to get a lot of work done all at the same time, and try to build a lot of things at the same time, continuing doing these streams and making sure that they're cool, they're good. Takes a lot of work. And it's great work. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy every minute of it. I'm sure Manny does too. There's some stuff that we want to get to the point where we don't have to do anymore. Is that right, Manny?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
But honestly, guys, if there's anything else anyone wants to mention or say, feel free to go for it right now. We will be reaching out to everybody that's submitted stuff to the zine. We're piecing it together. We're looking at the first week of September. We're going to the print shop and stuff tomorrow or Thursday to figure out a few things, figure out how we're going to put together. We have a lot of things we want to put out there. We want to put out some music stuff. I can't say too much yet until it's in the play. It's in the works. The zine. So we're gonna have like the SOS radio sort of format. It's gonna go out as a zine. It's also gonna go out in music based. Let's say soon. So all the musicians that I played that night, you'll be getting a message. I'm looking at you, Gene Reeves. Currently, I've posted still in the chat. I'm looking at you, my dear friend. And of course all the other musicians that we played that night. So we're trying to piece that together. We're just trying to figure out how we can ship things from Mexico, or if we should. We're trying to figure out shirts and merch, because a lot of people have been asking about all that stuff. And I'm rambling at this point. Oh, the private Patreon meetup. Make sure you guys check the messages in Patreon and let me know what day and times would work really well, and then we'll start scheduling them on a constant. And hopefully, if things go as they have been going, I'll have even more news in the coming weeks. So good stuff happening. New music on the horizons. Oh yes, my dear friend Gene Reeves. Oh, we know we've been pumping your stuff, just giving a little bit of teasers. Since you're here, Gene, I was hoping I can play I'm definitely going to play the one that you gave me permission to play, the unreleased track on the next Orthodox episode, which will be on Friday. So I'm going to reach out to you, Gene. I got a couple questions, a couple things I want to do with you. Orthodox Family Life says, is the EPL episode with you on their channel? Yes, it is. I can send it to you. I can't remember what it's called. He has it there, like special drop-in guest Mano. I drop in halfway through. It was an interesting interview. Let me go off on that for a minute, because that interview, that conversation. So I walked into it, and Jerry mentions it too. I walked into it. He was talking specifically politics stuff. You'll see it in the heading. And then within a short period of time, we started just mostly talking about orthodoxy. I seem to be doing that a lot. I don't know why I'm mentioning this. I don't know. It's funny because I thought oftentimes, like when I can't go into a rant. I'm half asleep. I'm getting tired. It's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of people have been asking me to do things on Hermeticism, New Age, my story. Like I got a lot of people asking me about that. Hermeticism, New Age, my story. Man, there are things I've been thinking about writing about. Yeah, I may just do it. Yes. You totally should. Absolutely. I'm not the greatest writer. So it's a punk rock zine. It doesn't have to be. I'm not the greatest writer either. I just do stuff. I'm not the greatest musician either. I just do it. I fully support just do it. Just really do it. You'd be surprised, guys. If there's something you want to do, I don't want to sound like a cheesy, one of those guys that gets you all motivated, one of those motivational malakis. That's not what I'm looking to be doing. But seriously though, just doing things, it's weird. This floodgate opens and all of a sudden, even if you have like writer's block or any of that stuff, a couple people were mentioning it. Stephanie was mentioning it. Denise was mentioning it. Tatiana was mentioning it. I think someone else was mentioning it too. Just start writing stuff. and or like playing music, whatever, and just like don't be afraid to make those mistakes. And then you all of a sudden you'll see, oh my God, man, it was Orthodox Tony Robbins. I'm going to stop right now. I prefer Drake is the greatest writer of all time. I would agree with you, Burrito Bar. I would agree with you, my dear friend. This is true. But anyways, just do stuff. Doing stuff is pretty awesome. That is what it is. That's what the DIY concept is. That is what we do, really. We just make stuff up as we go along. I love you, Joseph Beard. Even though you call me Tony Robbins. What was I going to say? There was something about being on EPL, exposing powerful lies. I was talking about something. I don't know. I'm so tired. I'm really tired. I think I'm gonna go to bed. Manny, let's call this a night. If anyone has nothing else to say, we do love you. Like seriously, we say that every time. It's legit. It's true. Reach out if you need to. Word to Big Bird. We will definitely be seeing you, I believe, Friday. Look for that announcement. I will be on Mr. Westford, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, because people sent me messages about talking about Hermeticism, that my past, some conspiratorial stuff, I guess you say, in terms of like social engineering and that kind of thing. Breakdown on the Changing Images of Man document or book that was written by Stanford Institute, and a bunch of other things that led me back to Orthodoxy and like, you know, cracking that open. So it's funny when I've been on like podcast talking about those things, I always want to just go back to talking about Orthodoxy, not from like me talking about it, but I just want to hear stories. So even with exposing powerful lies, I started asking him how did he got to Orthodoxy. So it turned into like that. It was like I was more interested in that. I don't know. That's where my mind's at. That's where my heart's at, I guess. I'm trying to learn stuff. So I will put those episodes out one day. I'm just not feeling it just yet. So a couple of people asked me about those. I promise, because it seems that a lot of people find that helpful. Talking about the Hermeticism, Gnosticism, New Age, what that means. You know, the Changing Images of Man document in particular, because of its, you know, where it comes from and what it is, and it talks about the society we live in currently in terms of culture creation and social engineering, and the importance of all that stuff. Yeah, this stuff is important. I'm just my head's not at it yet. Just want to talk about this other stuff. Anyways, my dear friends, I'm going to bed. I love you, each and every one of you guys. Word to Big Bird. We'll see you real soon. And I'll put out this episode with Father Christopher Foley and this segment, the live segment, out on Thursday, God willing. You, each and every one of you guys, are in our prayers. Pray for us as well, that we know what we're doing and that we're doing it for the right reasons. So pray that we're doing this for the right reasons and that we're moving in the right direction. If God wills it, we will build it. Adios, my dear friends.
Can I ask you a random question?
Please do.
What's that spoon for?